Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? It started with the ping of my phone, nothing more than a simple vibration, a sound that had become so commonplace in my life I barely noticed it anymore. But that evening, as I sat in my dark living room, nursing a glass of wine after a long, grueling week, the message that appeared on my screen was far from ordinary. It wasn't from a friend, not a colleague, nor anyone I'd expect to hear from. The name on the screen sent a chill crawling up my spine. Emily, my sister, my older sister, who had passed away 6 months ago. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The words didn't seem to register, didn't make sense. My heart began to race, thumping in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. Emily was dead. She couldn't be texting me. And yet, there it was, her name, clear as day. The message itself was short, simple, but it carried an unease that I couldn't shake. I know what you did. I dropped my phone onto the couch beside me, my hand trembling. The room seemed to close in on me. The air grew thick, and I struggled to breathe. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the impossible. There was no way. It had to be some sort of sick joke. Maybe a prank from one of my friends who had somehow gotten hold of my sister's old phone number. That seemed like the only logical explanation. But deep down, a part of me couldn't let it go. It was the exact message I would expect from her. Emily had always been able to catch me off guard, always had a way of saying just the right thing to get under my skin. But this was different. The message came from a number I didn't recognize, but it wasn't as if I hadn't seen that number before. I had many times in the months following her death. There were bills, utility statements, subscriptions, so many things to take care of after someone's passing. But none of them had been as personal as this. I grabbed my phone again, my fingers pressing nervously against the screen as I stared at the message. The text had come in at exactly 11:48 p.m. Without thinking, I typed out a reply. Who is this? Stop messing around. I hesitated after I sent it, my breath shallow as I waited for the reply. It felt foolish, like I was playing some childish game, but the fear gnawing at me couldn't be ignored. This wasn't something that could just be laughed off. A few moments passed, and I almost began to convince myself that it was just some glitch, some weird trick of technology. But then the reply came. You know what you did. You think I'm gone? But I'm still here. The words sent an electric jolt through me. It was like a gut punch, a visceral reaction that I couldn't control. My hands went clammy, and my stomach twisted into knots. This was no longer a joke. I stood up from the couch, pacing back and forth in the dim room. What did this mean? Was it really Emily? I glanced at the phone again, looking for any indication that this was some sort of scam or prank. But there was nothing. No clues. No sign that this wasn't real. My mind scrambled for a way out of this, for a way to explain it. But nothing made sense. My sister had been gone for 6 months, her death as sudden as it had been tragic. She had been involved in a car accident on her way back from a trip, her car swerving off the road and flipping over in the dark. I remembered the phone call I'd received that night. The frantic voice of the police officer on the other end, telling me she was gone. The funeral had been unbearable, every moment a reminder of how quickly life could be taken from you. We had said our final goodbyes, laid her to rest, and I thought, that was it. But now, here I was, staring at my phone, gripped by something far worse than grief. This was something else entirely. I replied again, my fingers shaking as I typed. Emily, is this really you? Please tell me this is a mistake. I watched as the dots blinked, signaling that someone was typing a response. My breath caught, and I froze, as if the air itself had thickened. What could she say that would make this make sense? The reply came. I'm not the one you need to worry about. That was it. The message left me speechless. What did that mean? What was it trying to say? I stared at the phone in disbelief. My throat went dry. Was this some sort of warning? I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to pretend this wasn't happening, but I couldn't. I felt drawn in, caught in a web of fear and confusion. I couldn't look away. I replied, voice tight, heart pounding. Who else is involved? What are you talking about? For what felt like an eternity, there was no reply. The dots didn't blink. There was nothing. And then, at exactly 11:59 p.m., the final message appeared. They're watching you. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My pulse quickened, and I felt a cold sweat begin to form on my brow. They're watching me. Who? Who was watching me? Was this some kind of sick game? I dropped the phone onto the couch again, my mind racing. I couldn't sit still. I had to move, to do something. But what? My legs felt weak, and my vision blurred as panic took over. The room seemed to tilt around me, the walls pressing in as though they were closing in on me. Who was watching me? What had I done? The question looped in my mind like a mantra, each repetition digging deeper into my already fragile mental state. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure where to turn. I walked to the window, glancing out at the empty street below. The streetlights flickered in the distance, casting an eerie glow across the quiet neighborhood. Everything seemed normal, but it didn't feel that way. It didn't feel right. I glanced back at my phone, the message still sitting there, haunting me. The words, "They're watching you," echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the unknown that now loomed over me. The seconds ticked by like hours. Each minute stretched into eternity. The silence of the house felt suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That something, or someone, was lurking in the shadows. The phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed it immediately. "Are you alone?" The question seemed innocent enough, but there was something about it, something in the way it was phrased, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I typed back, "Yes, I'm alone." "Who is this? What do you want from me?" The reply came quickly. "You've been warned." A cold shiver ran through me. This couldn't be happening. I looked around the room, as if expecting to find someone hiding in the corner, someone who could explain all of this. But there was no one, just me. And the phone. I knew, in that moment, that I was no longer in control. The world had tilted, and I was trapped in something I couldn't explain. The terror, the confusion, it was all too real. The text wasn't a joke. It wasn't a prank. It was a warning. And whatever was coming next, I had no idea how to stop it. I could barely remember the day my sister had passed away. It was all a blur, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. She had been everything to me, my older sister, my protector. Her sudden death was something I hadn't been prepared for. No one ever is. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. A text message had popped up on my screen. I had been expecting a late night notification, maybe from work, or some random junk. But when I saw the name, my blood ran cold. Samantha. My dead sister. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It wasn't possible. How was this even happening? I sat up in bed, the room feeling suddenly colder. My heart raced in my chest. Was this some kind of sick joke? Had someone hacked into her phone, or were they somehow using her old number? It had been months since her funeral. I opened the message, my hands trembling. "I miss you. Come find me." The words were simple, yet they sent an icy chill down my spine. I stared at the screen for a moment, my mind racing. It felt wrong. It wasn't just the fact that it came from her number. There was something about the message itself that made my skin crawl. I immediately checked the time. It was past midnight. Way too late for anyone to be playing pranks on me. My finger hovered over the keyboard, as my mind struggled to make sense of what was happening. Maybe it was just some sort of glitch, I told myself. Maybe it was some kind of weird error from the network. I tried to reason with myself. But deep down, I knew that it couldn't be that simple. I quickly typed out a reply, trying to shake off the unease that had gripped me. "Who is this?" I pressed send, hoping for some kind of rational explanation. But when the message went through, it wasn't like any normal text exchange. The read receipt didn't pop up. It lingered for a moment, and then the message appeared. "Don't look for answers. Just come to me." That was it. That was all the text said. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't some weird prank. My sister's number, I knew it. I stared at the phone, feeling the cold air around me pressing in. The hairs on my arms stood on end, my body rigid with disbelief. I could feel the panic creeping in. My sister was dead. I had watched her lowered into the ground myself. There was no logical reason for this, and yet, here I was staring at her name on my screen. Was it some kind of sick coincidence? Was someone out there trying to mess with my mind? But who would do something like that? No one knew how much I missed her, how devastated I had been when she died. I swallowed hard. The phone buzzed again. I looked down, and there it was. Another message. "You need to come to me. You have to see the truth." This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. This felt real. And the words were seeping deep into my mind, curling around me like a thread, pulling me closer to the darkness. A flood of thoughts raced through my mind. Was I losing my mind? Was this some sort of hallucination? I couldn't tell anymore. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs and beg whatever was on the other side to stop this madness. But there was one thought that gnawed at me, one thought that stood out above the chaos. What did my sister mean by, "Come find me"? I got out of bed, pacing in my small, dimly lit bedroom. I could still feel the weight of the message pressing on my chest, like something suffocating me from the inside out. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to even think about it. But what if this was some sort of message? Some sort of final goodbye? What if she was trying to tell me something? Or was this just the beginning of something far worse? A part of me wanted to block the number, to erase it, to ignore it and pretend it was just some weird mistake. But there was another part of me, the part that still missed her, the part that still wanted to believe that she hadn't really left, that urged me to keep reading. I picked up the phone once again, the weight of it like a stone in my hand. The blinking cursor on the screen seemed to mock me, as if daring me to respond. What was I supposed to do? What was the right choice? I opened the message again. This time, the words didn't feel like they came from my sister. They felt colder. Distant. "I'm not gone. I'm waiting for you." My heart skipped a beat, and a chill ran through me. That was it. I could no longer deny it. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a glitch. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. Something I couldn't even begin to understand. I stared at the phone, at the message. What did it mean? How could this be happening? What was the truth I needed to find? I had to make a choice. Was this a sign? Should I go to the place she had always loved, the place where we spent so many happy moments together? The place where we had laughed, talked, and shared secrets? It didn't take long for me to make up my mind. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair and slipped it on. The cold air outside made my breath visible, and the silence of the night felt suffocating. I couldn't help but feel like I was being pulled toward something I couldn't understand. And I didn't want to go, but I knew I had no choice. The message wasn't just words anymore. It was a command. It was a pull, a force that couldn't be ignored. My sister, the sister I had lost, was waiting for me, and I needed to go. I walked out of my house into the dark, empty street. The only light was the pale glow of the street lamps. As I made my way to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that somehow, somewhere, someone, or something, was watching me. The drive felt like it took forever, the winding road stretching out ahead as if it would never end. But the closer I got to my destination, the more I felt the weight on my chest grow heavier. Something wasn't right. I wasn't just going to a place I once knew so well. I was going somewhere else. I could feel it. Whatever was waiting for me was no longer just a memory. It was real. And I was walking right into it. As I pulled up to the old cabin where my sister and I had spent so many summers together, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. The porch light was on. It hadn't been on in years. I stepped out of the car, my feet crunching on the gravel as I walked slowly toward the front door. The wind whispered in my ear, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. The porch light flickered, then steadied, casting an eerie glow over the front steps. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling as I slowly twisted it, and then, in that moment, everything changed. The door opened by itself. It creaked as if something, or someone, was waiting for me inside. I didn't have time to react. The door slammed open with a force that made me jump back. The message, the words, the truth, it was all waiting for me inside. The door slammed wide open, and a wave of cold air rushed past me. It was like a gust from the deep, forgotten corners of the earth. The temperature dropped, and I could feel the icy breath of something unseen pushing against my skin, making the hairs on my neck stand up. I froze for a moment, standing at the threshold. The familiar cabin, the one where my sister and I spent so many summers, now felt wrong. The warm, welcoming space had been replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on my chest. The light flickered above, casting long, ominous shadows on the wooden floor. I could hear the creak of the old beams as the wind outside pushed against the walls. My breath came out in shallow gasps, and my hand instinctively reached for the doorframe as if to steady myself. But there was nothing solid about this moment. Nothing felt real. I stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, the familiar sound now unnerving, as if the cabin itself was alive, watching me, waiting for something. The air smelled of old wood, dust, and something more. Something metallic, something like decay. My mind raced. Why had I come here? What was I hoping to find? I had no idea. The living room looked as it had the last time I'd been here, but there was an unnatural stillness to the place. The furniture was covered in white sheets, the outlines of couches and chairs only visible through the layers of dust and time. I could barely make out the faded pictures on the walls, the ones of my sister and me, of our family. The room was frozen in time, a snapshot of what once was. I moved slowly, cautiously, my feet dragging across the old wooden floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the weight of the place was pressing down on me. But I had to see this through. I had to understand what was happening. Suddenly, I heard it, a faint whisper. It came from somewhere deep within the cabin, from a place that felt impossibly distant and close at the same time. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned toward the hallway leading deeper into the house. There was someone, there. I could feel it in the air, like a presence moving just out of sight. "Samantha," I whispered, barely hearing my own voice above the pounding in my ears. No response. Just the whisper again, this time clearer, like a soft voice calling from the shadows. I had to move forward. The house seemed to draw me in, pulling me down the narrow hallway, through the kitchen, and past the small door that led to the basement. I couldn't stop now. I couldn't turn back, not after everything. It started with the ping of my phone, nothing more than a simple vibration, a sound that had become so commonplace in my life, I barely noticed it anymore. But that evening, as I sat in my dark living room, nursing a glass of wine after a long, grueling week, The message that appeared on my screen was far from ordinary. It wasn't from a friend, not a colleague, nor anyone I'd expect to hear from. The name on the screen sent a chill crawling up my spine. Emily. My sister, my older sister, who had passed away 6 months ago. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The words didn't seem to register, didn't make sense. My heart began to race, thumping in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. Emily was dead. She couldn't be texting me. And yet, there it was, her name, clear as day. The message itself was short, simple, but it carried an unease that I couldn't shake. I know what you did. I dropped my phone onto the couch beside me, my hand trembling. The room seemed to close in on me. The air grew thick, and I struggled to breathe. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the impossible. There was no way. It had to be some sort of sick joke. Maybe a prank from one of my friends who had somehow gotten hold of my sister's old phone number. That seemed like the only logical explanation. But deep down, a part of me couldn't let it go. It was the exact message I would expect from her. Emily had always been able to catch me off guard, always had a way of saying just the right thing to get under my skin. But this was different. The message came from a number I didn't recognize, but it wasn't as if I hadn't seen that number before. I had, many times, in the months following her death. There were bills, utility statements, subscriptions, so many things to take care of after someone's passing. But none of them had been as personal as this. I grabbed my phone again, my fingers pressing nervously against the screen as I stared at the message. The text had come in at exactly 11:48 p.m. Without thinking, I typed out a reply. Who is this? Stop messing around. I hesitated after I sent it, my breath shallow as I waited for the reply. It felt foolish, like I was playing some childish game. But the fear gnawing at me couldn't be ignored. This wasn't something that could just be laughed off. A few moments passed, and I almost began to convince myself that it was just some glitch, some weird trick of technology. But then, the reply came. You know what you did. You think I'm gone, but I'm still here. The words sent an electric jolt through me. It was like a gut punch, a visceral reaction that I couldn't control. My hands went clammy, and my stomach twisted into knots. This was no longer a joke. I stood up from the couch, pacing back and forth in the dim room. What did this mean? Was it really Emily? I glanced at the phone again, looking for any indication that this was some sort of scam or prank. But there was nothing, no clues, no sign that this wasn't real. My mind scrambled for a way out of this, for a way to explain it. But nothing made sense. My sister had been gone for 6 months, her death as sudden as it had been tragic. She had been involved in a car accident on her way back from a trip, her car swerving off the road and flipping over in the dark. I remembered the phone call I'd received that night. The frantic voice of the police officer on the other end, telling me she was gone. The funeral had been unbearable. Every moment a reminder of how quickly life could be taken from you. We had said our final goodbyes, laid her to rest, and I thought that was it. But now, here I was, staring at my phone, gripped by something far worse than grief. This was something else entirely. I replied again, my fingers shaking as I typed. Emily, is this really you? Please tell me this is a mistake. I watched as the dots blinked, signaling that someone was typing a response. My breath caught, and I froze as if the air itself had thickened. What could she say that would make this make sense? The reply came. I'm not the one you need to worry about. That was it. The message left me speechless. What did that mean? What was it trying to say? I stared at the phone in disbelief. My throat went dry. Was this some sort of warning? I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to pretend this wasn't happening, but I couldn't. I felt drawn in, caught in a web of fear and confusion. I couldn't look away. I replied, voice tight, heart pounding. Who else is involved? What are you talking about? For what felt like an eternity, there was no reply. The dots didn't blink. There was nothing. And then, at exactly 11:59 p.m., the final message appeared. "They're watching you." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My pulse quickened, and I felt a cold sweat begin to form on my brow. They're watching me. Who? Who was watching me? Was this some kind of sick game? I dropped the phone onto the couch again, my mind racing. I couldn't sit still. I had to move, to do something. But what? My legs felt weak, and my vision blurred as panic took over. The room seemed to tilt around me, the walls pressing in as though they were closing in on me. Who was watching me? What had I done? The question looped in my mind like a mantra, each repetition digging deeper into my already fragile mental state. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it. I needed answers. But I wasn't sure where to turn. I walked to the window, glancing out at the empty street below. The streetlights flickered in the distance, casting an eerie glow across the quiet neighborhood. Everything seemed normal, but it didn't feel that way. It didn't feel right. I glanced back at my phone, the message still sitting there, haunting me. The words, "They're watching you," echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the unknown that now loomed over me. The seconds ticked by like hours. Each minute stretched into eternity. The silence of the house felt suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That something, or someone, was lurking in the shadows. The phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed it immediately. "Are you alone?" The question seemed innocent enough, but there was something about it. Something in the way it was phrased that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I typed back, "Yes, I'm alone. Who is this? What do you want from me?" The reply came quickly. "You've been warned." A cold shiver ran through me. This couldn't be happening. I looked around the room, as if expecting to find someone hiding in the corner, someone who could explain all of this. But there was no one, just me. And the phone. I knew, in that moment, that I was no longer in control. The world had tilted, and I was trapped in something I couldn't explain. The terror, the confusion. It was all too real. The text wasn't a joke. It wasn't a prank. It was a warning. And whatever was coming next, I had no idea how to stop it. I could barely remember the day my sister had passed away. It was all a blur, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. She had been everything to me. My older sister, my protector. Her sudden death was something I hadn't been prepared for. No one ever is. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. A text message had popped up on my screen. I had been expecting a late night notification, maybe from work, or some random junk. But when I saw the name, my blood ran cold. Samantha. My dead sister. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It wasn't possible. How was this even happening? I sat up in bed, the room feeling suddenly colder. My heart raced in my chest. Was this some kind of sick joke? Had someone hacked into her phone, or were they somehow using her old number? It had been months since her funeral. I opened the message, my hands trembling. "I miss you. Come find me." The words were simple, yet they sent an icy chill down my spine. I stared at the screen for a moment, my mind racing. It felt wrong. It wasn't just the fact that it came from her number. There was something about the message itself that made my skin crawl. I immediately checked the time. It was past midnight, way too late for anyone to be playing pranks on me. My finger hovered over the keyboard as my mind struggled to make sense of what was happening. Maybe it was just some sort of glitch, I told myself. Maybe it was some kind of weird error from the network. I tried to reason with myself. But deep down, I knew that it couldn't be that simple. I quickly typed out a reply, trying to shake off the unease that had gripped me. "Who is this?" I pressed send, hoping for some kind of rational explanation. But when the message went through, It wasn't like any normal text exchange. The read receipt didn't pop up. It lingered for a moment, and then the message appeared. Don't look for answers. Just come to me. That was it. That was all the text said. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't some weird prank. My sister's number, I knew it. I stared at the phone, feeling the cold air around me pressing in. The hairs on my arms stood on end, my body rigid with disbelief. I could feel the panic creeping in. My sister was dead. I had watched her lowered into the ground myself. There was no logical reason for this, and yet, here I was, staring at her name on my screen. Was it some kind of sick coincidence? Was someone out there trying to mess with my mind? But who would do something like that? No one knew how much I missed her, how devastated I had been when she died. I swallowed hard. The phone buzzed again. I looked down, and there it was, another message. You need to come to me. You have to see the truth. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. This felt real. And the words were seeping deep into my mind, curling around me like a thread, pulling me closer to the darkness. A flood of thoughts raced through my mind. Was I losing my mind? Was this some sort of hallucination? I couldn't tell anymore. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs and beg whatever was on the other side to stop this madness. But there was one thought that gnawed at me, one thought that stood out above the chaos. What did my sister mean by, "Come find me"? I got out of bed, pacing in my small, dimly lit bedroom. I could still feel the weight of the message pressing on my chest, like something suffocating me from the inside out. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to even think about it. But what if this was some sort of message? Some sort of final goodbye? What if she was trying to tell me something? Or was this just the beginning of something far worse? A part of me wanted to block the number, to erase it, to ignore it and pretend it was just some weird mistake. But there was another part of me, the part that still missed her, the part that still wanted to believe that she hadn't really left, that urged me to keep reading. I picked up the phone once again, the weight of it like a stone in my hand. The blinking cursor on the screen seemed to mock me, as if daring me to respond. What was I supposed to do? What was the right choice? I opened the message again. This time, the words didn't feel like they came from my sister. They felt colder, distant. I'm not gone. I'm waiting for you. My heart skipped a beat, and a chill ran through me. That was it. I could no longer deny it. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a glitch. This wasn't a prank. This was something else. Something I couldn't even begin to understand. I stared at the phone at the message. What did it mean? How could this be happening? What was the truth I needed to find? I had to make a choice. Was this a sign? Should I go to the place she had always loved, the place where we spent so many happy moments together? The place where we had laughed, talked, and shared secrets. It didn't take long for me to make up my mind. I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair and slipped it on. The cold air outside made my breath visible, and the silence of the night felt suffocating. I couldn't help but feel like I was being pulled toward something I couldn't understand. And I didn't want to go. But I knew I had no choice. The message wasn't just words anymore. It was a command. It was a pull, a force that couldn't be ignored. My sister, the sister I had lost, was waiting for me, and I needed to go. I walked out of my house into the dark, empty street. The only light was the pale glow of the street lamps. As I made my way to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That somehow, somewhere, someone, or something, was watching me. The drive felt like it took forever. The winding road stretching out ahead as if it would never end. But the closer I got to my destination, the more I felt the weight on my chest grow heavier. Something wasn't right. I wasn't just going to a place I once knew so well. I was going somewhere else, I could feel it. Whatever was waiting for me was no longer just a memory. It was real, and I was walking right into it. As I pulled up to the old cabin where my sister and I had spent so many summers together, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. The porch light was on. It hadn't been on in years. I stepped out of the car, my feet crunching on the gravel, as I walked slowly toward the front door. The wind whispered in my ear, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. The porch light flickered, then steadied, casting an eerie glow over the front steps. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling as I slowly twisted it, and then, in that moment, everything changed. The door opened by itself. It creaked as if something, or someone, was waiting for me inside. I didn't have time to react. The door slammed open with a force that made me jump back. The message, the words, the truth. It was all waiting for me inside. The door slammed wide open, and a wave of cold air rushed past me. It was like a gust from the deep, forgotten corners of the earth. The temperature dropped, and I could feel the icy breath of something unseen pushing against my skin, making the hairs on my neck stand up. I froze for a moment, standing at the threshold. The familiar cabin, the one where my sister and I spent so many summers, now felt wrong. The warm, welcoming space had been replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on my chest. The light flickered above, casting long, ominous shadows on the wooden floor. I could hear the creak of the old beams as the wind outside pushed against the walls. My breath came out in shallow gasps, and my hand instinctively reached for the doorframe as if to steady myself. But there was nothing solid about this moment. Nothing felt real. I stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, the familiar sound now unnerving, as if the cabin itself was alive, watching me, waiting for something. The air smelled of old wood, dust, and something more, something metallic, something like decay. My mind raced. Why had I come here? What was I hoping to find? I had no idea. The living room looked as it had the last time I'd been here, but there was an unnatural stillness to the place. The furniture was covered in white sheets, the outlines of couches and chairs only visible through the layers of dust and time. I could barely make out the faded pictures on the walls, the ones of my sister and me, of our family. The room was frozen in time, a snapshot of what once was. I moved slowly, cautiously, my feet dragging across the old wooden floor. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the weight of the place was pressing down on me. But I had to see this through. I had to understand what was happening. Suddenly, I heard it, a faint whisper. It came from somewhere deep within the cabin, from a place that felt impossibly distant and close at the same time. My heart skipped a beat, and I turned toward the hallway leading deeper into the house. There was something, someone, there. I could feel it in the air, like a presence moving just out of sight. "Samantha," I whispered, barely hearing my own voice above the pounding in my ears. No response. Just the whisper again, this time clearer, like a soft voice calling from the shadows. I had to move forward. The house seemed to draw me in, pulling me down the narrow hallway, through the kitchen, and past the small door that led to the basement. I couldn't stop now. I couldn't turn back. Not after everything. Gone. And now, in her place, was something else. A cabin, old, sunken, rotting into the earth like it didn't belong. The door hung ajar. Inside, I saw nothing but darkness. But something in me said, this is where it ends, or where it begins again. I crossed the threshold. The door slammed shut behind me. The slam behind me was final. Not a gust of wind. Not a loose hinge. Deliberate. The darkness inside the cabin wasn't ordinary. It was thick. Like it had been waiting. Like it had wait. It pressed against my skin, seeped into my pores. My breath felt like it was being filtered through tar. The air smelled of rot. Mira had vanished. The thing behind me had stopped humming. But whatever force had driven me here, it hadn't gone. It had just changed form. My hand found the wall. Rough wood. Damp. Soft, like flesh left in water too long. I moved forward. One slow step at a time. My eyes adjusted. Barely. A hallway stretched ahead, narrow and slanted. The floor dipped slightly, like the whole structure was sinking into the earth. Roots punched through the walls like veins. Some twitched when I passed. At the end of the hall, a door. Closed. Of course. I approached, and with every step, that same pressure built in my head again, like a tuning fork vibrating in my skull. My fingers touched the doorknob. Cold. Slick. It turned by itself. The door creaked open just enough for me to see the room. Inside was me. But not now me. A younger me. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at the same Polaroid I dropped earlier. Only this time, it was pristine. Everyone was in it. Morgan, Mira, Leo, and me. All of us, smiling under the sun just before everything went wrong. Younger me looked up, directly into my eyes. "I shouldn't have come back," he said. The voice was mine, but different. Empty. Detached. Like something had hollowed it out and left it echoing. "You shouldn't have come back either." "I didn't mean to," I whispered. "I didn't know this place was still alive." He laughed. Flat. Mechanical. "It's not alive. We are. That's the problem." Then he stood, and behind him the walls shifted. No longer wood. They pulsed, living tissue, veins writhed. The ceiling breathed. I tried to step back. The door slammed shut behind me again. A low groan rolled through the room, and suddenly the Polaroid in his hands began to burn, slowly curling at the edges, melting their smiles into twisted shadows. Younger me dropped it, but it didn't fall. It hovered, spinning, flickering, projecting images onto the walls, one after another, each one showing a version of me. Running, screaming, hiding, dying. In every single one, something caught me in the end. "What's happening to me?" I asked, breathless. Younger me stepped closer. "You broke the cycle?" "What cycle?" "This place is a loop. A test. Every time someone comes back, they feed it. If they die, it resets. If they remember, it gets stronger." "You remembered?" "I only remembered bits." That was enough. The room began to shake. He grabbed my wrist, suddenly frantic. "You still have a chance. But only if you don't finish the memory. Don't let it fully come back." "What happens if I do? Then you become me?" I tried to pull away. His grip tightened, fingers like bone and bark. "You need to go beneath," he said. "That's the only place it doesn't reach. Beneath." He pointed to the floor, and suddenly I saw it, a square outline in the rotten boards. A hatch. I hadn't noticed it before. He let go. The roots don't lie. They only bind. Then, without warning, his body collapsed. Just fell, like a puppet with its strings cut, empty, gone. The floor beneath me creaked, then moaned. The hatch pulsed once, then again. I dropped to my knees and lifted it. Below a staircase. Descending into darkness far blacker than the one I just left, and echoing up from that void, I heard them. Voices. All the voices I thought I'd forgotten. Mira, Morgan, Leo, and mine. Screaming, crying, whispering. My foot touched the first step, and the door above sealed shut forever. Each step I took downward made me feel less like I was walking and more like I was sinking. The stairs beneath the cabin weren't made of wood. They were stone, wet, moss, covered, slick with something that smelled like old blood and mold. Roots hung from the ceiling above, some twitching like worms, some hanging still like nooses. The air got colder with each step, but never fresh. It was a heavy cold, the kind that settles in old basements where things were forgotten on purpose. The voices that had called to me from below were silent now. Or maybe they were listening. I reached the bottom, and for a moment I thought I had gone blind. Then a flicker, a dim blue glow, like bioluminescent fungus, pulsed along the stone walls. I was in a narrow corridor that stretched further than I could see, veins of root and bone entwined in the stone, like the tunnel had been grown, not built. At the far end of the corridor, Something stood, a figure, back turned, still. I didn't call out, not anymore. I just moved slowly, silently. As I drew closer, the blue light pulsed again, revealing the figure more clearly. It was Leo, but not the boy I remembered. He was older now. His body stretched unnaturally tall. His limbs were too thin. His hands twisted. One shoulder slumped lower than the other like something had been feeding unevenly. His clothes were rotted remnants of his old camp uniform, covered in sap, dirt, and streaks of black fluid. He turned. His face was mostly still Leo's, mostly, but his eyes were wrong, too wide, too dark, and they didn't blink. He smiled. Or something used his mouth to smile. "You came back," he said. I froze. Leo. He tilted his head as if tasting the name. "I was," he said, "but down here. We all become part of it." He stepped forward. The stone floor seemed to ripple beneath his feet. "I tried to warn you that night. I screamed your name as they dragged me down, but you were already running." My throat tightened. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know you were." "You did." He stepped closer. "You chose not to remember." The light flickered again, and in a flash, the corridor was filled with others, figures along the walls, dozens of them. All the campers who vanished over the years. Some only half formed, some little more than skeletons wrapped in moss. Some, like Leo, twisted, human enough to still speak, but no longer belonging to the surface world. "You all left us down here," Leo said, his voice quieter now. "To feed it. To forget us." "I didn't know," I shouted, suddenly furious. "We were kids! We were scared! What the hell were we supposed to do?" His face didn't change. "Was screamed for years. Did you hear us?" I backed away. "What is this place? What's beneath all of this?" He nodded behind me. I turned, and there it was, a door, stone, covered in markings that hurt to look at. Carvings made of spirals and slashes, and things that moved even when I wasn't watching. It was breathing, ever so slightly. "That's where it sleeps," Leo whispered. "Where the first root waits. We dug too deep that summer. We thought it was just a weird cave. The door cracked, just a hair, and something hissed out. Not air, not gas. A memory that wasn't mine. A little girl, alone in the forest, digging, laughing, singing to herself, until she found it, the thing buried beneath the oldest tree, the root that didn't die, even after the lightning struck it. She touched it, and it touched back. Leo was beside me now. It lives off memory, guilt, secrets." The door creaked wider. Inside, something shifted. I heard whispering again, clearer now. "You left me there," Mira's voice said. "You let them take me." "No," I whispered. "You ran ahead. You watched," Morgan's voice said. "And you didn't stop it?" I clutched my head. "No, that's not what happened." But I remembered. Flashes. Running. The scream. Turning back. Seeing Mira's hand reaching out of the water, pulled by something underneath. And me turning away. I had told myself the story differently for years. Had buried it. But the root knew. It remembered. The door swung open. The corridor went dark. Only Leo's voice remained behind me. "You want it to end?" "Yes." "Then step inside." "But what if I don't come back?" Leo's smile was bitter. "None of us do. But maybe, just maybe, you'll bring it with you." The whispers behind the door grew louder. They were all waiting. And my foot crossed the threshold. The moment I stepped through the doorway, I felt the air change. It pressed in on me, not just around my skin, but inside me, like it was crawling into my lungs, my blood, my thoughts. There was no floor beneath my feet, but I wasn't falling. I was floating, suspended in a space that looked like a cavern, but moved like a living lung. The walls pulsed gently, coated in wet root, flesh and veins that glowed with a deep crimson light, like they were filled with blood that had long since curdled. And then I heard it. A sound so low it shook my teeth. Not a growl, not a hum, something older. A heartbeat, steady, slow, massive, The thing beneath Pemba was alive, and it was waking up. My feet finally touched something, soft but solid, like walking on dense moss stretched over bone. All around me, the shapes of twisted bodies were embedded in the root walls. Some faces I recognized, campers, counselors. Others were too distorted to name, mouths open mid-scream, eyes forever wide. And then she stepped out of the wall, not walked, peeled. Mira, or what was left of her. Her skin was smooth and damp like a mushroom cap. Her eyes glowed with that same blue light I'd seen in Leo. Her mouth moved wrong, twitching as she tried to smile. "Do you see it now?" she asked. I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry. My tongue felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. The moment her fingers touched mine, the entire cavern shuddered. Not an earthquake, not noise. A memory. My mind split open. I was 12 again, back at camp, nighttime. I saw Mira standing at the edge of the lake, flashlight trembling in her grip. She looked back at me. "Should we go?" she asked. In my real memory, I nodded and we turned around. We left, but this version kept going. Mira stepped into the water, and I just stood there, watching. A pale hand reached up from beneath the surface, wrapped around her ankle. She screamed. I took a step forward, but didn't move. I watched the water swallow her whole, and ran. The vision broke. I was on my knees in the cavern. Mira stood over me, her face twisted with sadness. "We remember the truth," she said, "even when you bury it." Behind her, the cavern's walls peeled apart, revealing a pit, an endless vertical tunnel that pulsed like a throat. From within it, I heard something climbing. Not fast, not clumsy, slow, intentional. Every step sounded like a branch snapping underwater. Mira looked at me. "You came here for answers. But there's only one question that matters now." I stood wobbling. "What question?" She stepped aside. From the pit, a shape rose. It wasn't a creature. Not in the way we understand them. It was roots, woven into a vaguely human form. A face with too many eyes. A body stitched together from bark, bone, and darkness. It reeked of decay and sweetness and damp earth. It looked at me, and I understood it. Not through words, but through feeling. It was the root of the forest. The memory beneath the village. The thing that remembered what everyone else chose to forget. And now, it had me. It reached a hand toward me. Long, fingered roots twitching like antennae. I heard a voice again. Not in my ears. In my head. "Will you carry me?" I didn't understand. "Carry you where?" The cavern shuddered again. Roots above began splitting, falling, growing rapidly outward, like they were reaching toward the surface. To the village. To the world beyond. "Why me?" I asked. The voice returned. "Because you remember. And remembering gives me shape." My hands began to change. Veins darkened. Skin stiffened. Roots crept up my wrists like vines wrapping a fence post. Mira's voice broke through the fog. "You don't have to let it in. But if you do, there's a cost." "What cost?" She hesitated. "Everyone who knows you will forget you. Like you were never here. Like you were never born." The shape pulsed again. Waiting. "Will you carry me?" I looked down at my changing arms. The root had already begun to take hold, but a spark of resistance flickered in me. I could walk away. Seal the door behind me. Bury the truth again. Live with the lies. Or I could carry it. Take it with me. Let the root feed on me instead of the village. Let it sleep again. Just for a little while, I stepped forward, placed my hands into its open palms, and whispered, "I will." The cavern exploded in light, white, hot, blinding, and then silence. I woke up in the forest, alone. No cabin, no stairwell, no Mira, no Leo, no signs of any of it. Except my hands were stained black with root lines, and etched into my skin were the words, "Will you remember aid?" I didn't go home right away. I wandered the forest, hands buried in my pockets, trying not to look at the dark lines threading up my arms. The wind whispered names that sounded familiar, but slid away the moment I tried to focus. The trees bowed as I passed, too slow to be natural, too synchronized to be coincidence. Something had changed, not just in me, in everything. When I finally reached the village edge, it wasn't how I remembered it. The old church that used to lean left stood perfectly straight. The well by the square, sealed for years, was uncovered, water reflecting a sky that looked too deep. And the people, they didn't know me, not even a flicker of recognition. I stood in front of my own house and watched my mother walk out the front door, purse slung over her shoulder, keys jangling. Her eyes passed right through me like I was missed. I called out her name. Her pace didn't change. I screamed it. Nothing. I reached for her arm. My hand passed right through. I wasn't just forgotten. I wasn't there. Not to them. Not anymore. I stumbled down the road like a ghost. Tried a dozen faces. Classmates. Shopkeepers. Even the dog that used to bark at me from behind the butcher's fence didn't flinch when I walked through it. I didn't exist. Except one person did see me. A girl, sitting on the swing in the park, maybe 6 years old. Hair tied in red ribbons. She looked straight at me, tilted her head. "Why are you crying?" I hadn't realized I was. I knelt down. "You can see me." She nodded, serious. "You're one of them now?" "One of what?" Her answer was too soft to hear. I leaned closer. She whispered, "One of the ones who remember." Her eyes glowed faintly blue, and that's when I knew she'd seen it too. We sat in silence for a long time. She kicked her feet slowly, swinging in the still air. "You were in the forest," she said. Not a question. I nodded. "Did it speak to you?" I nodded again. "Did it make you choose?" "Yes." She looked at her shoes. I said no. That hit me like a slap. "You what?" She stopped swinging. I told it no. I ran, and then I forgot, until I saw you. My blood turned to ice. She continued, voice trembling now. "I remembered the door, the smell, the screaming, my sister. But I left her. I left her down there." She looked up at me, tears streaming silently. I left her with it. I sat beside her. Root lines itched under my skin. I looked at the blue flicker in her eyes, just a spark, not full flame. "You said no. And it let you leave." She nodded. "But now it's waking up again. I feel it in my dreams." I stood. "It's not going back to sleep this time." She stared at me. "It's growing," I said. "The root is in me. But it wants more." She hopped off to swing. "Then we have to stop it. You saw what's under there. How do we stop that?" She didn't answer. She walked across the park, reached into a nut hole in the old oak tree, and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She handed it to me. Inside it a wooden pendant, blackened with age. The same sigil I'd seen carved into the trees around the door. The shape the root creature had on its chest. "It left this behind," she said, "when I ran." I turned it over in my hand. It pulsed. Not like a heartbeat, more like a countdown. I looked at her. "What is it?" "I think it's a key." "To the door?" "No." She shook her head. "To something beneath the door." That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was inside the root. Not a dream. A memory. It's memory. Of fire. Screams. Villages swallowed. People praying to gods that never answered. And always the same phrase echoing over centuries. "Will carry what they bury." I woke in the middle of the street. Hands clenched. Nails bloody. And in the distance, in the woods, a new door was open. One I hadn't seen before. The pendant throbbed like it had a heartbeat of its own. I kept it wrapped in the cloth, but the warmth of it soaked through, pulsing stronger with each hour. I knew I should toss it, hurl it back into the woods, bury it, anything. But I couldn't. Not because I didn't want to. Because it wouldn't let me. The little girl, her name was Lena, stayed close, never speaking much, always watching. I asked her more than once how she remembered. How she'd held on to what the rest of the village had lost. Her answer never changed. I listened to the silence. I didn't understand what that meant until the sky changed. It was subtle at first, light that didn't match the hour, a crescent moon that blinked like an eye, stars rearranging themselves into symbols I couldn't read. Then came the voices. Not out loud, inside. Inside everything. The creek whispered secrets it shouldn't have known. The wind brought back words I'd forgotten I ever said. Even my own shadow moved a half second too slow, like something was trying to catch up to me. And through all of it, the pendant pulsed harder. Lena and I stood at the edge of the woods where the new door had appeared. It wasn't made of wood or metal. It was stone, black as coal, veins of glowing moss twisting across it like veins. No handle, no hinges, just a single groove down the middle, a lock, and the pendant was the key. Once we go in, Lena whispered, "We don't get to forget anymore." I looked down at her. She wasn't scared, just sad. "Why us?" I asked. "Because we're the only ones who remember what they tried to hide." The door opened when I pressed the pendant to the groove. It didn't creak or groan. It breathed. The footsteps stopped, and then came the voice again. "You don't remember, do you?" The voice was no longer a whisper, but a full sentence, spoken with terrifying clarity. It was neither male nor female, but something else, something ancient. "You are one of us." I felt a cold shiver creep down my spine. One of us. The air seemed to grow colder, and for a split second, I felt a presence, something close, something real, standing beside me, watching me. I strained against the restraints holding me, but they wouldn't budge. "I don't understand," I whispered, desperation creeping into my voice. "What are you talking about? What do you want from me?" The voices swirled around me again. "We are the forgotten. Those who came before, those who lost their way." "Lost," I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. "Lost where?" "In the spaces between," the voice replied, a chuckle lacing the words. "In the spaces that others pass through but never truly see. We are the ones who never reached the light, the ones who slipped through the cracks. You're not different from us. You've always been one of us." I felt the darkness pulse around me again, this time with a deeper intensity. The shadows seemed to grow longer, reaching toward me like fingers, pulling at my skin, my soul, until I could feel the very essence of me being torn apart. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice growing weaker, but there was no answer. The footsteps began again, this time moving closer, their sound unmistakable, purposeful. And then, in the deepest shadow of the void, I saw it. A figure. Tall, unmistakable. Its body was twisted, its limbs impossibly long, its face distorted, a grotesque, empty mask. Its eyes? There were no eyes, just voids of darkness that seemed to swallow everything in their path. It moved toward me, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the fear that radiated from me. The whispers grew into a cacophony, deafening in their intensity. My heart pounded in my chest, and yet the figure only grew closer. I was trapped, suffocating under the weight of this nightmare, with no escape in sight. And then it spoke, its voice the same cold, commanding one I had heard before. "You cannot escape the forgotten. We are all you are, all that you will ever be." The figure stepped forward, its form swallowing the darkness around it, until I could feel its cold, grasping presence closing in on me. And then everything went black. I don't know how long I drifted in that void, lost to everything that had once made sense. Time was irrelevant here. There was only the overwhelming silence, broken only by the distant echoes of the whispers. Those voices that continued to haunt me, even in the dark. And then, with a sharp jolt, I awoke. I wasn't sure if I had truly woken up, or if it was simply another layer of the nightmare. The darkness was still there, but this time it felt different. It wasn't a suffocating blackness, but more of a distant, oppressive shadow lingering at the edges of my vision. There was something else, too, a feeling, an awareness. Like I wasn't alone, but I was being watched. Slowly, I tried to move, my limbs heavy as though they had been asleep for far too long. I raised my hand, expecting the sensation of cold stone or soft earth beneath me, but there was nothing. Just the sensation of weightlessness, as if I were suspended in mid-air. "Where am I?" I whispered, the words trembling in the stillness. No answer came. I was alone, or at least it felt that way. But then, through the darkness, I saw a faint light. At first, it was only a shimmer, a glimmer far away in the distance. But it grew brighter, and as it did, the feeling of being watched intensified. My heart began to race, and for the first time since waking, I felt a surge of panic. I wasn't alone. I never had been. The light moved, shifting and flickering, as though something was approaching. It was faint at first, but it grew steadier with each passing moment. As it drew closer, I saw it, a figure silhouetted against the soft glow. A shape that was tall and thin, indistinct but unmistakable. It hovered in place, neither advancing nor retreating, but remaining just within my line of sight. I should have been terrified, and yet, in that moment, there was a strange calmness that washed over me. My fear was still there, lurking, but it was quieter now, as though my mind had accepted the inevitable. Something was drawing me closer to this figure. Something beyond fear, beyond logic. I took a step forward, and then, just like that, it was gone. The figure vanished, leaving nothing but the lingering presence of its absence. I stood frozen, searching the dark with my eyes wide open, waiting for any sign of movement. But there was none. The air was thick with tension, as if everything were holding its breath, waiting for the next step. The whispers returned. But now, they weren't just whispers. They were clearer, louder, like voices in the distance calling out to me. Calling my name. "Do you hear it?" One voice asked, its tone cold and indifferent. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, I felt a sudden, overwhelming pull, a magnetic force drawing me forward, deeper into the darkness. It was impossible to resist. My feet moved on their own, carried by something far more powerful than my own will. "Come closer." The voice called again, now unmistakably familiar. "You must see." With every step I took, the presence grew stronger, more tangible. I was getting closer, closer to whatever lay beyond the veil of this endless night. And then, just as quickly, the light reappeared. This time, it wasn't a distant glow. It was blinding, almost too bright to look at, like staring directly into the sun. But I couldn't look away. My feet carried me forward, and before I knew it, I was standing in its center. The world around me shifted. I found myself standing on solid ground. The light was still there, surrounding me, but now it felt different. Warmer, more natural. I blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden change, but the world around me remained a blur. I could hear something, though, something faint. A sound. A voice. A whisper. "Remember," urged, though it wasn't clear who or what was speaking. "Remember what you are." My breath caught in my throat. The words seemed to hold weight, like a puzzle piece falling into place. I tried to focus, tried to grasp whatever memory this place, this presence, was pushing me toward. My mind was clouded, foggy. Images flashed, disjointed. Faces, places, and things that felt important but unfamiliar. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced through my skull. It was like 1,000 needles pricking at once, searing my mind with fragments of something. A past, a life, something I couldn't quite place. But then, just as abruptly, the pain stopped. I gasped for breath, my hands trembling as I touched my forehead, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. The light around me flickered, casting strange shadows against the barren landscape that had materialized. It was as if I had stepped into another world, one that was familiar yet strange, like a memory just out of reach. And then, the figure returned. It wasn't just a shadow now. It had form. It stood in front of me, solid and real, yet its face was still a blur. It was a person. No, not a person, not entirely. There was something different about it, something ancient, something that belonged to a world I didn't understand. "You've been here before," the figure said, its voice low, a whisper that echoed in my very bones. "You've seen this. You've forgotten." I opened my mouth to speak, but again, no words came. The figure stepped closer, reaching out toward me. Its hand was cold, colder than anything I had ever felt, and as it touched my skin, a wave of memories flooded my mind. Memories of places I had never been, faces I had never seen, all mixed together in a swirling vortex of confusion. And then, like a bolt of lightning, it all clicked. I wasn't here by accident. I had been brought here for a reason. The truth, an unsettling, terrifying truth, began to unfold in my mind, but it was too much to process, too much to understand all at once. It wasn't just about me. It was about everything, this world, the forgotten ones, the dark spaces between. And at that moment, I realized with sickening clarity, this wasn't just a nightmare. This was my reality. This was where I truly belonged. And I had never been more terrified. I don't know how long I drifted in that void, lost to everything that had once made sense. Time was irrelevant here. There was only the overwhelming silence, broken only by the distant echoes of the whispers. Those voices that continued to haunt me, even in the dark. And then, with a sharp jolt, I awoke. I wasn't sure if I had truly woken up, or if it was simply another layer of the nightmare. The darkness was still there, but this time it felt different. It wasn't a suffocating blackness, but more of a distant, oppressive shadow lingering at the edges of my vision. There was something else, too, a feeling, an awareness. Like I wasn't alone, but I was being watched. Slowly, I tried to move, my limbs heavy as though they had been asleep for far too long. I raised my hand, expecting the sensation of cold stone or soft earth beneath me, but there was nothing. Just the sensation of weightlessness, as if I were suspended in mid-air. "Where am I?" I whispered, the words trembling in the stillness. No answer came. I was alone, or at least, it felt that way. But then, through the darkness, I saw a faint light. At first, it was only a shimmer, a glimmer far away in the distance. But it grew brighter, and as it did, the feeling of being watched intensified. My heart began to race, and for the first time since waking, I felt a surge of panic. I wasn't alone. I never had been. The light moved, shifting and flickering, as though something was approaching. It was faint at first, but it grew steadier with each passing moment. As it drew closer, I saw it. A figure silhouetted against the soft glow. A shape that was tall and thin, indistinct but unmistakable. It hovered in place, neither advancing nor retreating, but remaining just within my line of sight. I should have been terrified. And yet, in that moment, there was a strange calmness that washed over me. My fear was still there lurking, but it was quieter now, as though my mind had accepted the inevitable. Something was drawing me closer to this figure. Something beyond fear, beyond logic. I took a step forward. And then, just like that, it was gone. The figure vanished, leaving nothing but the lingering presence of its absence. I stood frozen, searching the dark with my eyes wide open, waiting for any sign of movement. But there was none. The air was thick with tension, as if everything were holding its breath, waiting for the next step. The whispers returned. But now, they weren't just whispers. They were clearer, louder, like voices in the distance calling out to me, calling my name. "Do you hear it?" One voice asked, its tone cold and indifferent. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, I felt a sudden, overwhelming pull, a magnetic force drawing me forward, deeper into the darkness. It was impossible to resist. My feet moved on their own, carried by something far more powerful than my own will. "Come closer." The voice called again, now unmistakably familiar. "You must see." With every step I took, the presence grew stronger, more tangible. I was getting closer, closer to whatever lay beyond the veil of this endless night. And then, just as quickly, the light reappeared. This time, it wasn't a distant glow. It was blinding, almost too bright to look at, like staring directly into the sun. But I couldn't look away. My feet carried me forward, and before I knew it, I was standing in its center. The world around me shifted. I found myself standing on solid ground. The light was still there, surrounding me, but now it felt different, warmer, more natural. I blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden change, but the world around me remained a blur. I could hear something, though, something faint. A sound, a voice, a whisper. Remember, it urged. Though it wasn't clear who or what was speaking. Remember what you are. My breath caught in my throat. The words seemed to hold weight, like a puzzle piece falling into place. I tried to focus, tried to grasp whatever memory this place, this presence, was pushing me toward. My mind was clouded, foggy. Images flashed, disjointed, faces, places, and things that felt important but unfamiliar. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced through my skull. It was like 1,000 needles pricking at once, searing my mind with fragments of something. A past, a life, something I couldn't quite place. But then, just as abruptly, the pain stopped. I gasped for breath, my hands trembling as I touched my forehead, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. The light around me flickered, casting strange shadows against the barren landscape that had materialized. It was as if I had stepped into another world, one that was familiar yet strange, like a memory just out of reach. And then the figure returned. It wasn't just a shadow now. It had form. It stood in front of me, solid and real, yet its face was still a blur. It was a person. No, not a person, not entirely. There was something different about it, something ancient, something that belonged to a world I didn't understand. You've been here before. The figure said, its voice low, a whisper that echoed in my very bones. You've seen this. You've forgotten. I opened my mouth to speak, but again, no words came. The figure stepped closer, reaching out toward me. Its hand was cold, colder than anything I had ever felt, and as it touched my skin, a wave of memories flooded my mind. Memories of places I had never been, faces I had never seen, all mixed together in a swirling vortex of confusion. And then, like a bolt of lightning, it all clicked. I wasn't here by accident. I had been brought here for a reason. The truth, an unsettling, terrifying truth, began to unfold in my mind, but it was too much to process. Too much to understand all at once. It wasn't just about me. It was about everything. This world, the forgotten ones, the dark spaces between. And at that moment, I realized with sickening clarity, this wasn't just a nightmare. This was my reality. This was where I truly belonged, and I had never been more terrified. The moment I realized this was no dream, the world shifted again. The ground beneath me pulsed. Yes, pulsed, as though it had veins, as though it were alive. I could feel something deep below the surface, writhing, slithering, watching. The warmth from the light was gone, replaced by a cold that didn't touch the skin but soaked into the bones. The sky, or whatever hung above me, turned the color of rotting fruit, grayish, red, sick, and ahead, where once there was just empty, barren land, now stood a single tree. It was impossibly tall, twisted. Its bark looked burned, flaking off in pieces that crumbled into ash before they even touched the ground. But what stopped me, what rooted my feet to the spot, was the red liquid trickling down its trunk. Not sap, not water, blood, thick, dark blood. I wanted to run. Every nerve in my body screamed for it. But I couldn't. My feet moved toward the tree like they weren't mine anymore, and I realized something horrifying with each reluctant step. This place wanted me to see the tree. It had been waiting. As I got closer, I saw things hanging from the branches. Not leaves, not fruit, faces. Some were fresh, eyes still open, lips twitching with the last traces of breath. Others were rotting, skin sliding off like wax too close to a flame. But they all had one thing in common: they were staring directly at me. And one of them, just one, was mine. My own face, pale, bruised, eyes wide open, mouth slack with an expression caught mid-scream. I collapsed to my knees. No. No, no, no. The words spilled out of me like bile. My fingers dug into the cold soil, but it offered no support. I wasn't grounded. I was sinking, mentally, emotionally, maybe even physically. The whispers came again, louder this time, surrounding me, inside me. You forgot. You let it happen. You were the last witness. And then, the tree spoke. Its voice wasn't like the others. It didn't whisper. It groaned, like the cracking of ice over deep water. Its trunk split slightly, and more blood poured out, thicker this time, pooling around its roots. You remember now, it said. I shook my head violently, eyes shut, heart hammering.
No! I don't know what you mean. I don't know what this is.
But I did. Somewhere, in the part of my mind I'd locked away, I knew. I'd seen something. Years ago. Before the nightmares, before the sleepwalking, before the whispers ever began. I'd seen something in a forest that didn't exist on any map, under a sky that blinked instead of shone. I was 12, and I wasn't alone. I looked up from the blood, slick grass, and that's when I saw them. Not just the faces in the tree now, but figures around it. Dozens of them, pale, mouthless, eyeless, like wax dolls left too close to a fire, melted and shapeless. They stood in a perfect circle, hands down, heads tilted toward the tree. One by one, they turned to face me. I recognized them. My childhood friend who vanished at the summer camp. The mailman who smiled every day until the day he didn't come back. The old woman from across the street who never opened her curtains, then never opened her door again. They were all here. Because they had seen it too. Because they had remembered. And that's when the final horror hit me like a slap across the face. This tree, it wasn't just a monument. It wasn't just feeding. It was growing. Fed by the memories we buried. Watered by the blood of those who refused to speak. Rooted in guilt. And now it wanted mine. I staggered back, but the ground behind me had changed. A wall of bodies, torso to torso, chest to back, had risen from the dirt, pressing in like flesh bricks. I turned to run left, another wall. Right, same. The only way was forward. Toward the tree. It said again, louder now, firmer. You are the key. I screamed, not out of fear this time, but out of fury. Raw, defiant rage. Whatever this place was, it wanted to feed on my weakness, and I would not give it that. I picked up the nearest rock I could find, jagged, dark, glistening with wet rot, and I hurled it at the tree. The rock struck the trunk, and the tree screamed. Not metaphorically. It screamed like a dying animal, high, pitched, primal, endless. The blood turned black and shot upward like reverse rain. The faces twisted and convulsed. My own duplicate shrieked and snapped its eyes shut. The ground beneath me trembled. I had heard it. And now I'd made it angry. The figures started to move. Slowly at first, jerky, twitching, heads flailing in broken arcs. Then faster. They charged, not at the tree, but at me. The last thing I saw before I turned and ran was the tree opening up, like a mouth. Wide and hollow and impossibly deep. It wanted to swallow me whole, and I was running straight toward it. I was running toward its mouth, and I knew it. The tree's hollow core yawned open wider than physics should allow. Its insides were pitch black, yet I could feel movement within, like 1,000 worms writhing in unison. As I neared it, a wind burst outward, not cool like air, but hot and wet like the breath of something diseased. My skin stung, but I didn't stop. Because behind me, the pale figures were gaining. I didn't want to find out what would happen if they touched me. Their movements had grown frantic, bone cracking fast, as if the tree's pain had unhinged whatever held them together. Just before I crossed into the hollow, I heard something sharp. A voice I recognized. Lucas. I stopped short, not because I wanted to, but because my body did it for me, like something inside seized my muscles. I turned toward the voice without meaning to. It was a girl, no older than 12. Barefoot, tangled hair. Her eyes were wide and sad, but they shimmered like polished stones. Her dress was torn, stained at the bottom with dried blood, and despite everything, despite the horror all around, she looked calm. Too calm. "You left us behind," she said. I tried to speak. Couldn't. "You were supposed to warn them." And just like that, memory surged. Me and 3 other kids. A trail behind the old summer camp. A dare. A rusted gate hidden beneath ivy. We'd slipped through it, laughing, whispering, flashlights in our hands. And then the forest changed. I remembered her now. Her name was Mira. She was the youngest of us. The shyest. The one who always hummed when she got nervous. That same humming filled the air now, low and rhythmic. "You saw it first," she whispered. "You knew it was watching, but you didn't speak." A lump caught in my throat like a stone. "I tried," I said. The words felt weak, pathetic. "No one would have believed me." "They wouldn't have needed to believe you," Mira replied, her voice sharper now. "They just needed to be told." The memory unfolded violently. Us running, screaming, one by one being taken by the woods. Not dragged, not clawed, just swallowed. No blood, no bodies, just silence. And I'd turned back, alone, and lied. I said we'd gotten separated. I said I didn't remember. I said they must have wandered off. And that everyone believed me. Because I was the survivor. Now I understood. This wasn't just a nightmare. This was penance. The tree was built from guilt. Its roots fed on silence. Every scream I hadn't voiced, every truth I'd buried, it had turned them into something real. Mira began to walk toward me, but her steps didn't disturb the grass. She was floating now, her feet inches from the ground. Her eyes were darkening, not angry, but endless, like looking into a void. "They want your story, Lucas," she said. "Give it to them. Or stay here with us." The pale figures halted behind her, their limbs drooping like forgotten marionettes. One by one, they looked down, as if waiting, as if offering a choice. I turned to the tree again. Its mouth still gaped, but something had changed. Inside I saw pages, floating mid-air, dozens, hundreds, each with writing that pulsed and shifted, like the ink was alive. One drifted close to the edge of the opening, and I reached for it, despite everything in me screaming not to. As my fingers touched the page, heat surged up my arm, not painful, more like exposure, as if my thoughts were being peeled open and laid bare. The words on the page shifted. I was there. I saw them vanish. I lied. I buried the truth, and something found it. It was my handwriting. The moment I acknowledged it, a wave of noise hit me. Screams, whispers, laughter, crying. Like every emotion I'd ever suppressed had been set loose. I stumbled backward, clutching my head, but I didn't let go of the page. Behind me, Mira nodded once, and then she vanished. So did the figures, and the tree's mouth began to close. I had one chance. I ran. Not away from it, but into it. Darkness swallowed me whole, and then silence. I woke up in my apartment. Not the one from the forest. Not the surreal version. The real one. Dirty dishes in the sink. A flickering ceiling light. My backpack by the door. I sat up on the couch, drenched in sweat, the back of my shirt sticking to the cushion. Was it over? Was any of it real? I stood slowly, heart pounding, checking the windows, the door, the time on my phone. 3:12 a.m. My call log was empty. My calendar was wiped. My photos, every single one was gone. Except one. It was a photo I'd never taken. The tree, towering, bleeding. And in front of it, 5 kids stood. I was one of them. The caption read, "Now you remember." And in the distance of the photo, barely visible, a small figure in a white dress stood among the trees. Mira. She was smiling. But her eyes were still watching me. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in my kitchen with the lights on, every bulb in the apartment burning like a ward, and that damn photo on my phone, no matter how many times I tried to delete it, stayed. Tap, delete, confirm, Nothing. It would vanish for a second, and then reappear, sometimes in a different folder. And each time it came back, she was a little closer to the foreground. I wasn't dreaming. I knew that now. That forest, the tree Mara, all of it was real. Not real in a way science could chart or the police could investigate, but real in the way guilt is real. In the way buried memories claw their way back no matter how deep you've hidden them. But the worst part wasn't the photo. It was what had appeared under it. A message. New. Typed in the Notes app. Time-stamped at exactly 3:33 a.m. Go back to where you started. That could mean one place. The old camp. The one they shut down after the accident. It had been fenced off for years. Rumors flew. Landslide, sinkhole, rabid animal attack. But no one ever said the truth. Not even me. Because I had stayed quiet. Because silence was the easier road. But I wasn't a kid anymore, and the forest wasn't done with me. By morning, I was on the road. I didn't pack much. Just a flashlight, water phone, and an old printed map from when I first went there years ago. I didn't trust GPS anymore. The last time I tried to follow tech in the forest, it betrayed me, rerouted me, twisted the roads. This time, I wanted something I could hold, tear, burn if needed. The camp sat deep in the backwoods, far enough that cell signal dropped about 20 miles out. As I drove the final stretch, the trees leaned closer to the road than I remembered. Or maybe they grew hungry while I was gone. When I parked the car, I sat for 5 minutes before stepping out. The air felt heavier here, not just humid, thick, like walking into someone's breath. The kind of atmosphere that settled in your lungs and made you feel watched, even when nothing moved. I stood before the old gate, the same one we'd snuck through all those years ago. The rust had grown like moss, flakes falling like snow when I brushed against the iron bars. And beyond it, nothing. Just overgrowth, faded signs, a long dirt trail that wound into the woods. I crossed the threshold. The moment I did, something clicked. Like a latch in my mind, unfastening. Memories returned, not all at once, but like flashes in a broken slideshow. Us sneaking down the path. Mira's nervous humming. Jake making jokes to cover his fear. And Morgan, the bold one, leading us forward with a cocky grin and a flashlight that barely worked. We'd seen the path split. Left toward the lake. Right toward the trees. We went right. Always wondered what might have happened if we'd chosen left. But maybe the forest didn't care about paths. Maybe it only cared about what we brought with us. Guilt. Fear. Secrets. About half a mile in, I found something strange. A rope tied to a tree. Frayed. Sun. Bleached. Hanging low. At first, I thought it might have been from a ranger or camper, but then I saw the pattern etched into the bark beneath it. Not carved. Branded. Like something hot had pressed into the wood and marked it with a spiral of jagged lines. I touched it. My head split with sound. A scream. Not distant. Not faded like a memory, but fresh. Nearby and young. Mira's voice. Don't let them take me. I staggered back. The woods went quiet again, as if the trees themselves had inhaled and refused to exhale. But I kept going, because if the message was true, if I had to go back to where it started, then I had to find the place we first saw it. The clearing. The one with the stump. The one that blood. It took me longer than expected to find it. The trail was no longer a trail. Bushes had overgrown the edges. Roots like veins stretched across the ground, trying to trip me at every turn. But then, I saw the stump, and I froze. It was exactly how I remembered it, wide. Splintered. Its center rotted into a dark, wet pit, no leaves above it, like even the branches refused to grow over that space. But this time, it wasn't empty. There were shoes, 4 pairs, children's sizes, arranged in a perfect circle around the stump, like some kind of twisted ritual, and in the middle, a Polaroid photo. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was us, all 5 of us, standing in that same clearing. Our faces weren't scared. They were smiling. But it wasn't the smiles that made my blood run cold. It was the thing behind us. A tall, root-covered figure. No face, no limbs. Just bark and shadow and a wide, vertical mouth, like a knot ripped open. And it was reaching for me. The caption written on the bottom, in what looked like smeared charcoals. You left the door open. Something rustled behind me. I spun around. The forest was empty, but now I heard it. That hum. Faint, childlike, sad, and it was getting louder. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew it wouldn't be as simple as walking away. The forest wanted something, and it always got what it wanted. I didn't run. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I remembered what happened last time someone ran. Morgan. He ran screaming when we first heard the voices in these woods years ago. We thought he was trying to scare us, just playing it up, but when we found his shoe, just one, twisted under a root, and the silence that followed, we knew it wasn't a game anymore. I stood still, the Polaroid trembling in my hand. The humming circled me. It wasn't just in the air, it was inside my skull, like someone had pressed a tuning fork against my brain and let it ring. Low, melancholy, almost beautiful, in that way unsettling things sometimes are. I turned slowly, deliberately, but nothing was there, just trees, endless, watching trees, and then the humming stopped. In its place a voice soft, too familiar. Why didn't you come back sooner? I spun around. Nothing, again. But the voice was real. I knew it was real. And I knew who it belonged to. Mira, she was supposed to be dead. Lost. Swallowed by the forest like the others. But the voice didn't sound like something long buried. It sounded fresh. As if her lips had only just stopped moving. I looked down at the Polaroid again. Something had changed. Our smiles were still there, but my face was now scratched out. Not scribbled, not burned, clawed. 3 deep lines ran through my face in the photo. Fresh. I dropped it. I didn't want to look anymore. But my eyes wouldn't stop scanning the woods, every branch, every shadow. That's when I saw her, not walking, not floating, just standing, between 2 trees, half hidden by the bark. Her dress was the same one she wore that night, yellow with little white flowers. But it was faded now, like it had spent years buried in wet soil. Her skin was pale, too pale, almost gray-blue, but her eyes, they were alive, wide, frantic, pleading. She raised one arm slowly and pointed to her right, deeper into the woods. I didn't speak. I didn't dare. She mouthed something, over and over. I leaned closer, just enough to read her lips. Don't turn around. Don't turn around. Don't turn around. A crack behind me. I froze. Branches. Footsteps. Something big. I could feel its presence. Heavy, like gravity had doubled behind me. Mira didn't blink. She kept mouthing it. Don't turn around. I did the only thing I could. I backed away. Slowly. Step by step, keeping my eyes locked on hers. I didn't know if she was trying to help me or lure me, but whatever was behind me, whatever made that Polaroid claw itself, I knew it wasn't human. Another step, then another. The air grew colder and heavier, like whatever was behind me wasn't just watching, it was leaning in. Close, I could feel its breath on my neck, damp, moldy, like wet bark left to rot. Still, I didn't turn. I followed Mira's pointing hand, sidestepping between trees, deeper into the unknown. Then, a scream. Behind me. My scream. My own voice. It erupted from the woods like a recording played on loop. Screeching. Echoing. Twisting into something that sounded like laughter. It shook my bones. It wanted me to turn. But I didn't. I followed the pointing hand, until she disappeared. Just blinked out. A rush of air burst from the crack, stale and cold, like the exhale of something that had been holding it for centuries. Inside, darkness, but not empty. The floor was lined with carvings, rows upon rows of symbols that looked like they'd been scratched into the stone, not etched. Desperate, frantic. Some were words in dead languages. Some were pictures of things with too many limbs, too many mouths. And some were warnings. We stepped in. Behind us, The stone door sealed shut without a sound. The tunnel sloped downward. The deeper we went, the warmer it got. Humid. Breathing. The walls felt soft. Not like stone anymore, like skin. Lena pressed her palm to one and pulled back with a shudder. "It's growing again," she said. I didn't ask how she knew. I felt it too. Roots lined the ceiling, twitching when we passed under them. Some had teeth, others had eyes. A few dripped sap that hissed when it hit the floor. None of them touched Lena. They flinched from her. She said no. I muttered. "What?" Lena asked. Nothing. We reached the first chamber. It was massive, circular, walls high enough to lose in shadow. In the center stood a tree, black, leafless, cracked open down the middle like a mouth frozen in a scream. And inside it, suspended in tendrils of root and bone, was a man, or what used to be a man. His skin was bark, his eyes glowed green. His chest rose and fell once every few seconds. But he didn't look asleep, he looked trapped. Lena stared up at him. "That's my father." I turned to her, stunned. "What?" She stepped forward. "He came here after my sister disappeared. Said he had to make it right." I looked up at the man. His lips twitched. He was mouthing something. Lena whispered, "He's trying to warn us." I leaned closer. It took a few seconds to understand, then it hit me like ice water down my spine. He was mouthing, "Behind you." I spun around. Too late. The roots exploded from the ground and wrapped around us both. One yanked Lena backward, flinging her against the far wall. Another slithered up my leg and plunged a thorn deep into my thigh. I screamed. Fire raced through my veins. Memories not mine flashed behind my eyes, rituals in blood. Children fed to the roots, a village that chose to forget by offering lives to the thing beneath. It wasn't a punishment. It was a bargain. I fought the pain, reached into my pocket, and grabbed the pendant. It burned now. But when I held it up, the roots screamed. They recoiled like they'd touched flame. The thorn in my leg ripped free, and I collapsed beside Lina, panting. The tree man's eyes flared bright, and for the first time he spoke, no mouth movement, no breath, just a voice inside us. "Finish it." There was a stairwell behind the tree, hidden by more roots. We climbed it. Each step was slick, and the walls narrowed the higher we went. The air turned electric, thick with a scent like rust and rot. At the top, another door. But this one wasn't stone. It was bone, hundreds, maybe thousands, of bones fused together, sealed with black sinew, pulsing faintly. On its surface, a single handprint. Child-sized. Lena stepped forward. She didn't ask. Didn't flinch. She placed her hand against the door, and it opened. What we saw on the other side wasn't just another chamber. It was a memory. Frozen a loop of a village long buried in time, people gathered around the roots, chanting, crying. Children lined up, eyes blank. And at the center, a massive creature of wood and rotten hunger. The same one I'd seen in my visions. The same one I carried a piece of. The root god. And it saw us. It turned. Not just in the vision, but in the tunnel, in the chamber, in reality. It had been waiting. And now it remembered us too. The vision shattered like glass, and suddenly we were back inside the tunnel. The bone door had closed behind us, but the sense of being watched hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. Heavier. The kind of pressure you feel in your chest before a storm hits. Lena gripped my sleeve. Her voice came out in a whisper. "He saw us."
"It saw us."
I didn't have the words to respond. The root god, the thing they once worshipped, the thing they fed, was not just a memory. It was real. Alive. Waiting. And now it knew we were here. We retraced our steps through the tight passage. The tree that held Lena's father was still there. But now it pulsed like a heartbeat. He was gone. Only bark remained, hollowed and split, like he had been absorbed. The tunnel beyond had changed. More roots, more wet stone. It was like the place had woken up and was shifting, reconfiguring itself, making sure we couldn't leave the way we came. The walls breathed. literally expanded and contracted like lungs. I tried to steady myself, but the ground moved beneath my feet. Lena stumbled too, then pointed ahead. Another door. But this time, it wasn't ancient. It was new. Wooden. Hinges still shining, a brass knob, polished and gleaming. Just like the one from my childhood home. "Is that?" I began. "My bedroom," Lena said, wide-eyed. "That's the door to my old room." We stared at each other. This wasn't a hallucination. It was a trap. I gritted my teeth and turned the knob. The room inside was perfect. Too perfect. Lace curtains, sunlight pouring in from an impossible window, a dollhouse in the corner, a small bed with stuffed animals all arranged just so. There was even a smell, fresh linen and warm wood. It was her room. But the moment we stepped in, the door slammed shut behind us. No knob, no lock, just a blank wooden surface. And then came the voice. It didn't echo from the walls. It grew inside our heads. "Do you remember the lies?" Lena trembled. "That's my mother's voice." Another voice followed, deeper, rougher. "Do you remember what you forgot on purpose?" My chest tightened. That voice, I hadn't heard it since I was 7. My father, he disappeared after taking a walk into the forest. Everyone said he drowned. I never questioned it. But now I remembered something different. I remembered him whispering to the roots before he left. The walls of the room began to bleed. Slowly at first, dark streaks trailing down from the corners, soaking into the floorboards. The dolls in the corner turned their heads, one by one, until they were all looking at us. Then their mouths opened. Not stitched mouths, real ones. Wet, trembling, full of tiny teeth. The window shattered. Hands poured in through the frame. Long fingers, bark skin, nails like thorns. They clawed at the air, groping for us. Lena screamed and dove under the bed. I yanked at the door, pounding with my fists. Nothing. The dolls began to crawl. I reached for the pendant. It was glowing bright gold now, so hot it almost scorched my palm. But it had power. I held it to the wall, and the room screamed. Everything peeled back. Flesh, wood, fabric. The room dissolved into black mist, revealing what it really was, a chamber carved in root and rot, meant to trick us into staying. The root god wasn't just feeding on bodies. It fed on memories, and we were fuel. We ran again, deeper into the tunnels. No idea where we were going. The deeper we went, the louder the heartbeat got. The more the roots moved, reaching for us. At one point, a mouth opened on the floor and snapped shut inches from Lena's foot. But ahead, light, not sunlight, a cold, flickering blue. We emerged into a cavern unlike the others. Vast, open, and glowing. Crystals jutted from the walls, pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat. And at the center, a throne, woven from roots and bone and vines, and sitting atop it, the Watcher. It wasn't the root god. Not yet. This thing was smaller, human-shaped, faceless, wrapped in bark, limbs too long, ribs exposed. It didn't move. It didn't need to. It watched. Every breath I took felt like a sin in its presence. Lena froze. That's what speaks to them. The one that tells them to forget. The Watcher raised a hand, and the walls rippled. Dozens, no, hundreds, of faces stared back at us, frozen in the bark, eyes wide, mouths mid-scream. I recognized one. It was mine. I staggered back. My face was in the wall. My eyes blinked once. Then again. The memory hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. I had been here before, as a child. I'd found the pendant once before. I'd opened the door. I'd seen the root god. And I'd run. But I hadn't escaped. I'd bargained. And forgotten. Because the Watcher had taken my memory in exchange for my freedom. And now it wanted the rest. The pendant pulsed in my palm like a second heartbeat. I held it high. The Watcher flinched. Its faceless head turned toward me, and I heard its voice, not words, but meaning. You were supposed to forget. The walls shook. The roots hissed. The crystals flickered and shattered. Lena grabbed my arm. What do we do? I looked at the pendant, at the wall, at my own trapped face. Then I said, we'll break the bargain. She didn't ask how, she just nodded. And together, we stepped toward the throne. The air in the cavern thickened as we approached the throne. The Watcher, motionless, unblinking, seemed to become more present. If such a thing was possible. Every step we took was met with a rising pressure, like the very earth beneath us was warning us to turn back. The roots, once steady, began to twitch and writhe, as if they recognized the threat in the air. Lena's grip on my arm tightened. Her breath came in shallow gasps. "Are we sure about this?" "No," I whispered. "But we don't have a choice." The Watcher had already claimed too many lives, too many memories, and now it was demanding more. Our fear fed it. The pendant in my hand pulsed, as if answering the growing tension. It had already done something to this place. I could feel the energy of the cavern shifting, like the roots were reacting to its presence. Maybe it could give us the power we needed, but that was a dangerous hope. The Watcher remained silent, its faceless head tilted slightly, as if curious. "You cannot break the bond?" it said. Its voice didn't come from its mouth. No, this was something older, deeper. The roots themselves seemed to speak, their language impossible to grasp fully, yet I understood it. "You will be consumed like all the others, forgotten, erased." Its words sank into me, a truth too horrifying to face. But they also fueled my resolve. I wasn't ready to be erased. Not again. I wouldn't let the memories of everything we had fought for be lost to this creature. Lena, seemingly sensing my thoughts, stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "We'll see about that." I looked at her, surprised. The trembling girl who had clung to me for safety was gone. In her place stood someone willing to fight for the truth. Someone who had faced down the darkness before and wasn't afraid to face it again. I raised the pendant higher, and the pulsing light grew brighter, casting sharp shadows across the cavern. The Watcher's expression, if it could even be called that, shifted, its non-existent eyes narrowing. "You think you can undo what was done?" it asked, its voice now colder, more insistent. "The memory is mine. You are mine." The roots around us surged, reaching out like grasping fingers. The walls began to close in, and the blue light flickered, dimming with each passing second. The Watcher was trying to reclaim control, to drown us in the same hopelessness it had used to trap so many others. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, but I steadied myself. It wasn't just us who needed to escape. This place had claimed too many lives. It had to stop. We had to stop it. With a deep breath, I flung the pendant forward, and it shot across the room, its golden light trailing behind it like a comet. The roots recoiled, shriveling back in fear, as the pendant connected with the base of the throne. The cavern shuddered violently, the walls cracking as if they were about to collapse. The Watcher howled, a sound that was neither human nor anything that could belong in this world. It was a scream of fury and desperation, reverberating through every inch of the cavern. For a brief moment, everything stood still. The air thickened, then split open like a wound. The roots, the walls, the throne, all of it began to unravel, dissolving into the very ground beneath us. But the Watcher wasn't done yet. It thrashed, reaching out with roots and tendrils, trying to drag us back into the darkness. We could feel the cold fingers of the earth, pulling us, dragging us closer to its heart. But the pendant, it wasn't just a key, it was a weapon. And as the light surged around us, I felt its power burn through the roots, severing the connection between the Watcher and this world. The heartbeat, once rhythmic and constant, began to falter, slowing, growing weak. Lena grabbed my arm, her voice low but steady. "It's working." I nodded, but I could feel it in my bones. The Watcher wasn't going to go without a fight. The air around us crackled with dark energy, and the ground beneath our feet began to quake. "You think you can destroy me?" The Watcher's voice boomed, now tinged with something raw. "I was here before you, and I will be here long after you are gone." but the pendant was stronger. The roots continued to wither, the watcher's form becoming increasingly distorted, as if its very essence was being burned away. And then, with a final, deafening crash, the cavern exploded. We were thrown backward, the blast wave knocking us to the ground. The pendant burned through my hand, but I couldn't let go. We scrambled to our feet, dazed, but the watcher's presence was gone. In its place was silence. The roots were gone, the walls reduced to rubble. The light from the pendant flickered and dimmed, its glow finally fading away. We were alone. But something was different. The weight. The oppressive feeling that had hung over us for so long. It was gone. Lena's voice broke the silence. Did we do it? I looked around, scanning the cavern that had once been a nightmare. It was quiet now. The air was still, and in the distance, I could see the first rays of sunlight streaming in through a crack in the rocks. We did, I whispered. But we're not free yet. The air had changed. The heavy weight of the Watcher's presence, which had once filled the cavern with an undeniable tension, was now absent, leaving behind an eerie calm. The sunlight creeping through the cracks in the rocks felt too gentle, almost as though it was a deceptive veil, hiding the true cost of what had just transpired. Lena stood next to me, her face pale, her eyes still wide from the aftermath. We both knew that what we had done came with consequences far beyond the immediate victory. The Watcher may have been defeated, but there was no telling what else lingered in the shadows, waiting to claim what we had taken from it. We should leave, Lena said quietly, but there was a tremor in her voice that betrayed her uncertainty. Before whatever was left behind catches up to us. I nodded, pulling her gently along as we navigated the crumbling remnants of the cavern. The roots had completely withered away, leaving only charred remnants of their once powerful form. But despite the apparent destruction, something still lingered in the air. A residue of ancient power that couldn't be entirely wiped out, no matter how much we wished it could be. As we reached the cavern's mouth, the sun finally broke free of the rocky barrier, spilling its light onto the barren landscape outside. The sight of the open sky was a strange comfort, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over. We had removed one threat, but we had made a powerful enemy in doing so. What do you think happens now? I asked, my voice carrying a weight of its own. Lena didn't answer right away. She looked out across the land, her expression unreadable. I don't know, she replied, her voice soft. But I know that whatever comes next, we'll face it together. I nodded, feeling an unspoken bond form between us, a shared experience, something that had driven us to the edge and beyond. It was clear that we had won this battle, but the war, the true war against what lay beyond the Watcher's reach, was just beginning. The ground beneath us trembled slightly, and I caught a flash of movement in the distance. At first, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on my mind. But when I looked again, I saw them, shapes moving quickly toward us, their forms too indistinct to make out clearly. I tensed, my heart racing. We had just defeated the Watcher, but if there were more like it, more creatures tied to the darkness we had just unleashed, then we hadn't won anything at all. Lina, sensing my sudden unease, stepped closer. What is it? I don't know, I murmured, watching the figures approach. But whatever it is, it's coming fast. We had no time to prepare. No time to take in what we had just done. The faces of the dead, the memories we had shattered, rushed through my mind, and I realized just how little we had actually achieved. The Watcher's hold on this world was gone, but it had left behind its mark on everything it had touched. The figures drew closer, and I could finally make them out. They weren't human. They were like shadows, moving, shifting, but they had a presence, a malevolent force. The very air around them seemed to twist in unnatural ways, the light bending as if it was struggling to hold on to its form. Stay close, I whispered to Lena, pulling her behind me instinctively. But as I did, I realized that I couldn't protect her. Not from what was coming. The figures came into full view now, their forms monstrous, like creatures born from nightmares. And standing in front of them, at their leader's side, was a familiar face. One I thought I had left behind long ago. It was Marcus. His body was different, twisted. Like something had corrupted him. But his eyes were still the same. You thought you could erase it. Marcus's voice echoed across the barren landscape. But you only made it stronger. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The Watcher may have been defeated, but whatever it had been part of, whatever force it represented, was far from gone. The darkness wasn't just an enemy. It was a presence, an entity, and it had only been set free. Behind Marcus, the figures that moved like shadows coalesced into something more tangible, more horrifying. They were not human. They were remnants of the forgotten, beings who had been abandoned by time and left to rot in the cracks of the world. You cannot escape the consequences of your actions, Marcus continued, his voice cold, almost familiar. Not anymore. Lena's grip on my arm tightened as the wind began to whip around us. The shapes behind Marcus were shifting again, growing larger, more defined. The very ground beneath us seemed to quiver with their presence. Marcus smiled, a twisted, unnerving smile that sent chills down my spine. This is just the beginning. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. We had not defeated the Watcher. We had unleashed something far worse. The dawn that we had fought for had not arrived. It was only a mirage. And now we had to face the true horror of what we had done. The wind howled through the barren landscape, carrying with it an unsettling sense of finality. Marcus's twisted smile seemed to grow wider, his eyes gleaming with a knowledge that I desperately wanted to ignore. His presence, once a flicker of a memory, had solidified into something much darker, something far more real. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming to run, but I couldn't. Not yet. The shadowy figures behind him moved in unison, their shapes warping as if the world itself refused to acknowledge their existence. Their limbs were too long, their bodies too thin, and yet they were somehow familiar. A twisted echo of humanity, but not quite. They were something worse. Lena was breathing heavily beside me, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for an escape route. But I knew we had no chance. Not against what stood before us. Marcus stepped forward, his movement deliberate and slow, each step sending a ripple through the air. His form seemed to shimmer, like he wasn't fully a part of this world anymore. His voice, when it came, was laced with a venomous calm. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, his voice carrying an eerie resonance. "You thought you could end it all, but all you did was awaken it." I took a step back, my mind racing. What had we awakened? The Watcher had been defeated, its power broken. But the way Marcus spoke, the way those creatures moved, it was clear that whatever force had driven the Watcher was still alive. And it was angry. Lena's grip tightened around my arm, her body trembling. What are they?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising wind. I shook my head. "I don't know." Marcus let out a soft laugh, the sound echoing in the desolate space around us. "Do you remember the stories? The ones you were told as children? About the forgotten ones? The things that dwell in the spaces between worlds?" I felt a chill creep up my spine, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. The Watcher had been just one piece of a much larger, far more dangerous reality. The creatures behind Marcus, they were the forgotten ones. The ones that had been trapped in the spaces between time, between dimensions, and were now free. "You opened the door," Marcus continued, his voice now laced with an almost parental tone. "And now the real game begins." The wind began to whip around us, pulling at our clothes and tangling my hair. I could feel the ground beneath me tremble. The earth alive with an energy that I couldn't understand. The creatures behind Marcus had stopped moving, their presence now more oppressive than ever, as though they were waiting for something or someone. Lena whispered, "We can't let them win." I nodded, my mind working overtime to find a way out. The Watcher might have been defeated, but we were far from free. Whatever Marcus had become, whatever force he had aligned himself with, it was too powerful, too ancient. I glanced at the creatures behind him, their eyes glowing faintly, their forms shifting in unnatural ways. They weren't just predators. They were part of something much bigger, part of a force that sought to unravel the very fabric of reality. Marcus stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can fight us? You think you can stop what's coming?" He laughed, the sound like dry leaves scraping across the ground. "You've already lost. The battle was never yours to win." I looked at Lena, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. But there was something else there too, something resolute. We couldn't give up. Not now. "We haven't lost," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "We may not have all the answers, but we can't let them have what we fought for." Marcus tilted his head, his smile turning into something that almost looked like pity. "You still don't understand. It's not about what you fight for. It's about what you've already unleashed." Before I could respond, one of the shadowy figures behind him moved forward, its limbs stretching and contorting unnaturally. The air around it seemed to warp as it reached toward us, a horrible screech echoing from its mouth. Lena screamed, and I pulled her back, my heart racing. We had no time, no plan, but as the figure lunged, something inside me clicked. I couldn't let it end like this. Not like this. I pushed Lena aside and grabbed the nearest rock, swinging it toward the creature with every ounce of strength I had. The rock collided with its form, and for a brief moment, the creature faltered. But it didn't retreat. It only grew angrier. Marcus chuckled. "Is that all you've got? A rock?" But it wasn't just a rock. It was a symbol, an act of defiance. It was my refusal to let them win, no matter how impossible it seemed. Lena, standing just behind me, quickly found a sharp piece of debris from the crumbling landscape and lunged at another creature. It hissed, but there was hesitation in its movement. For a moment, I saw fear in its eyes, a crack in their perfect facades. The wind howled again, and the ground beneath us shook more violently. "This world isn't yours to protect anymore," Marcus said, his voice slipping into something darker, more threatening. "You've only drawn the line for your own destruction." But Lina and I, together, weren't ready to let the line fall. The creatures began to converge on us, faster now, each step heavier than the last. But this time, we weren't just trying to survive. We were fighting back. And we weren't going to let them win. The creatures moved faster now, their elongated limbs twisting in unnatural ways, the ground beneath them cracking with every step. It felt like time itself had begun to slow down, the air growing thick with an overwhelming sense of doom. The space around us seemed to warp, as if the very laws of nature were bending to their will. Lena and I stood back to back, our breaths heavy and frantic. My hands were shaking, my grip tightening on the shard of rock I held. But there was something more, something within me, that refused to give in to fear. We had come too far to let it all end now. The wind continued to howl around us, carrying with it whispers that sounded like distant voices, voices full of malice, full of things that wanted to drag us into their depths. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't let myself falter. Not this time. The first creature lunged at Lena, its claws scraping the ground, sharp enough to rip through steel. Without thinking, I threw myself toward it, using the rock like a weapon, slamming it against the creature's face. The impact sent a shockwave of energy through the air, but the creature only hissed and recoiled, its black eyes burning with fury. Lena took the opportunity to stab at its side with the sharp debris she had found, the creature letting out a deafening screech. But just as quickly as it had faltered, it regained its composure, more determined than ever. "They're not like anything we've faced before." Lena gasped, her eyes wide with terror. I nodded grimly, the weight of her words sinking in. These creatures, these forgotten ones, were far beyond the realm of human understanding. Their powers were ancient, and their strength seemed limitless. But we had something they didn't, our will to survive. Marcus stood at the edge of the chaos, watching with that same twisted smile on his face. He didn't seem concerned by the battle unfolding before him. In fact, he looked almost amused, as if he were watching a puppet show, the strings of fate tugging at each of us. "You still don't see it, do you?" Marcus's voice was cold and distant. "This isn't a battle you can win. It's a cycle, a loop that you can't escape. You're already trapped." I gritted my teeth. "Not if we break the cycle." His smile faltered for the briefest moment, a flicker of something. Uncertainty. No, it was too fleeting. Gone before I could make sense of it. Still, it was enough to drive me forward. I threw myself into the fray again, dodging the claw of another creature as it swept toward me. The air crackled with static, and every time one of the creatures moved, I could feel the world tremble beneath my feet. Lena was holding her ground, her eyes steely with determination. She swung her sharp debris again, aiming for the nearest creature's chest. It staggered back, its breath coming in ragged, inhuman gasps. She wasn't giving up, and neither was I. "We need to get closer to him." I shouted over the noise, my voice barely audible above the chaos.
We can stop, Marcus. We can stop this."
Lena nodded, her face set in a grim mask of focus. Together, we pushed toward Marcus, using the creature's movements to shield us from their attacks. Every step felt like we were walking through a storm, each movement taking everything we had just to stay alive. As we closed the distance, I could feel the oppressive force of the forgotten ones growing stronger, their energy building with each passing second. The world around us seemed to fade, the lines between reality and nightmare blurring. But there, in the eye of the storm, stood Marcus, watching us approach with that same twisted smile. "You really think you can stop it?" he said, his voice colder than ice. "You're too late. The doors are open. The damage has already been done." I didn't have time to argue. The creatures were closing in, and we were almost there. "This is it," I said to Lena, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my insides. "We have to stop him now." Lena's eyes locked onto mine, a silent understanding passing between us. We didn't have a choice. We had to end this, one way or another. With one final surge of energy, we lunged forward, crashing into the mass of creatures. Their howls echoed in the distance as we fought our way toward Marcus, every strike, every movement an act of desperation. I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes now, but it was too late. We were too close. Lena and I reached him in a blur of motion. I raised the shard of rock, aiming for his chest, but as my hand swung forward, Marcus's eyes locked onto mine. There was something in his gaze, something that made my blood run cold. For a moment, I froze. The world around me blurred, and everything seemed to fade into silence. Marcus wasn't just a man. He was something more. Something ancient, something beyond our comprehension. And then, with a chilling smile, he spoke one last time. "You can't stop it. Not anymore." Before I could react, the ground beneath us cracked wide open, and a flood of darkness poured through, swallowing everything. The ground trembled violently beneath our feet as the darkness surged upward like a living entity, consuming everything in its path. The creatures, the very air around us, seemed to twist and writhe as if they were part of some greater force, a tide of malevolent energy that had been unleashed from the very depths of the earth. The darkness swallowed the world, pulling us into an abyss where nothing seemed real, and the boundaries of time and space had shattered. Lena and I were torn apart in an instant. I felt the earth give way beneath me, my body tumbling uncontrollably into the blackness below. The air grew colder, denser, suffocating, and I could hear nothing but the deafening roar of the void. I reached out in panic, but there was nothing to grab onto, just endless, yawning blackness. In the distance, I saw a faint flicker, a glimmer of light in the consuming dark. Desperation flooded my chest as I forced myself toward it, kicking and flailing through the endless expanse. The wind howled past me, but there was no sound, only the disorienting sensation of falling through an empty void. I reached the light. Or I thought I did. Instead of a source of warmth, the light seemed to warp as I got closer, flickering and bending as though it were alive. It pulsed with a strange energy, an unnatural rhythm that seemed to pull at the very fibers of my soul. A voice, soft, low, almost a whisper, echoed through the darkness. "You're too late." The voice was everywhere, echoing from all directions. It wasn't just Marcus. It was something older. Something far more ancient, lurking beneath the surface of this nightmare. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrambled toward the shifting light, but it danced just out of reach, always pulling away from me. You think you can fight it. You think you can stop it. I looked around wildly, but there was no sign of Lena. No sign of anything except the pulsating light, the abyss, and the whispering voice that seemed to grow louder with each passing moment. Suddenly, I felt a sharp tug at my chest. Something cold, sharp, like fingers made of ice, gripped my heart, squeezing with relentless force. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled, falling to my knees. A black figure appeared before me, just at the edge of my vision. Its form shifting in and out of the shadows, a twisted amalgamation of limbs and eyes that defied comprehension. It leaned forward, its hollow, soulless eyes meeting mine. It was as if it was looking into my very soul, seeing everything I had ever been, everything I feared. And then it spoke. "You are nothing." I recoiled as the words cut through me like a blade, but they were not just words. They were a force, a crushing weight that threatened to pull me into oblivion. I gasped for air, but the pressure against my chest was overwhelming. And then, as if in response, something inside me snapped. A flicker of anger, of defiance, rose up from the depths of my soul. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stand, to push back against the overwhelming darkness. The black figure recoiled, its form wavering as though my very will had struck it. I wasn't sure how I did it, but I felt the grip on my chest loosen, and I was able to take a gasping breath. The darkness around me seemed to pulse, as if reacting to my defiance. But I knew it wouldn't be long before the abyss consumed me again. "Lena," I muttered under my breath, my voice hoarse. "Where are you?" I staggered forward, my body moving on its own, instinctively driven by the need to find her. The shadows seemed to part, just enough for me to catch glimpses of movement, flickers of something in the distance, and then I saw her. Lena was standing at the edge of a chasm, her body swaying as if she were fighting against some invisible force pulling her in. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with horror as she looked at the vast, swirling void before her. I called out to her, but my voice barely reached her. The wind that howled around us was too loud, the darkness too thick. "Lena! Hold on!" I shouted, but she didn't hear me. She was staring at something in the abyss, something that had drawn her in completely. It was then that I realized what was happening. The darkness wasn't just a physical force. It was a force of will, an entity that thrived on fear, on weakness. It fed on the soul, drawing us in with promises of power and understanding. But it was also alive. I fought the pull of the void with everything I had, running toward Lena. The distance between us seemed to stretch and shrink, the landscape warping around us, as if we were trapped in a nightmare that refused to end. When I reached her, she was no longer standing. Her hands were pressed against the ground, her fingers twitching with each desperate movement, as if trying to claw her way out of the chasm.
Lina!
I cried out, grabbing her arm and pulling her back from the edge. But she didn't respond. Her eyes were glazed over, her body stiff as if she were being pulled in by an invisible force. I fought against the darkness, pulling her with all my strength, but it was no use. The black tendrils of the abyss curled around us, tugging at our bodies, dragging us closer to the center of the void. And then, just as everything seemed lost, I heard a familiar voice. "You have to let go." It was Marcus. I turned to see him standing behind us, his face contorted into a twisted grin. The smile was not one of joy, but one of malice, of knowing something we didn't. Let go and embrace what you were always meant to become. But I wasn't going to give in. Not now. Not after everything. With one final effort, I pushed myself forward, my will surging through me like a tidal wave. The darkness recoiled as if it had been struck, and Lena's eyes snapped open, filled with confusion and fear. "Run!" I screamed, pulling her with me. Together we fought against the abyss, our steps unsure but driven by a single, unyielding desire: survival. But Marcus's voice echoed after us, colder than before. "You can't escape me. You can't escape what's coming." The darkness didn't let up. If anything, it pressed harder. Like a living weight, pressing down on every breath we took, every step we made. The landscape twisted and bent, the ground itself cracking and shifting beneath our feet, as though it too were part of some larger, twisted entity. An entity determined to pull us back into the void. Lena stumbled beside me, her eyes wide with panic as we ran, though the ground seemed to warp around us, making each step feel like we were moving through molasses. Each step I took felt like it might be my last, as though something invisible and malevolent was tugging at my very soul, trying to drag me down. "We can't outrun this," Lena gasped, her voice shaky and weak. "It's too powerful." I didn't answer her. I couldn't. I was too focused on one thing: surviving. We needed to get out. We had to find a way to escape this nightmare, this hellish place that had no end, no mercy. But as we ran, I realized something far worse. The more we struggled, the more the darkness responded. The very earth beneath us seemed to ripple and heave like a living creature, as if it was reacting to our movements, feeding off our fear. It was pulling us in. I could feel it more clearly now. The darkness wasn't just a force. It was conscious. It was aware of us, of every move we made, and it was adapting. The more we resisted, the harder it fought back. We came to a cliff, the jagged rocks dropping into an endless chasm. The abyss was beyond anything I could comprehend, an all-consuming darkness that stretched far beyond the horizon, deep into the bowels of the earth, a place no light could ever touch, a place that no human had ever returned from. I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest as I looked over the edge, trying to make sense of what lay below. But there was no bottom, just darkness, endless and suffocating, swallowing everything. "There has to be another way," Lena whispered, her voice cracking. I turned to look at her, but her eyes were fixed on the chasm, as if mesmerized by its pull. I could see the fear in her face, the way her hands trembled as she fought against the draw of the void. And then, something moved in the darkness. It was too fast to see clearly, but I felt it, its presence, something far worse than any creature I had ever encountered. Something ancient, lurking in the deepest reaches of this place, waiting for the moment to strike. "Lena, we have to go now," I shouted, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her away from the edge. But it was already too late. The ground trembled violently again, and before I could react, the cliffside crumbled beneath our feet. We were falling into the abyss. I tried to scream, to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing. Just endless darkness, stretching around us, swallowing us whole. I held onto Lena, my grip slipping as the darkness pressed in around us. I could feel the coldness of it, the suffocating grip of the void as it tried to pull us apart. It was overwhelming. The air, thick and oppressive, burned in my lungs as we plummeted deeper and deeper into the unknown. Just when I thought we couldn't fall any further, a massive force slammed into me, sending my body crashing into something solid. I gasped, my chest heaving, my vision spinning as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. But before I could gather my bearings, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of laughter, a low, guttural chuckle that seemed to vibrate in my bones. It was the same voice we had heard before, the one that had been taunting us from the start. "You can't escape me," the voice said, its tone mocking and cruel. "No matter how far you run, no matter how hard you fight, you will never escape what lies beneath." I looked around, but there was nothing. The darkness still clung to everything. The air thick with the sense of something watching, waiting. The laughter echoed again, more pronounced this time, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaky but determined. "What do you want from us?" The voice chuckled again, and then the darkness around us seemed to bend and twist, forming into a shape, a figure. It was shrouded in the same blackness that surrounded us, its form barely discernible. But I could feel its eyes on me, eyes that saw everything. "What do I want?" The figure's voice was deeper now, closer. "What I want is simple. I want what was always mine." I took a step back, my mind racing. I didn't understand. What was it talking about? "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me was already beginning to understand. This wasn't just about us. This was something far older, far more dangerous than anything we had faced. The figure took a step forward, and the shadows seemed to shift with it, like waves in the ocean. I felt Lena's grip tighten on my arm, her presence a silent comfort in the face of the overwhelming terror that threatened to engulf us. "What lies beneath is part of me," the figure said. "And you are part of this. You always have been." The words hit me like a cold wave, crashing over me, filling me with a dread I couldn't explain. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but there was nowhere to go. "You can't escape your fate," the figure continued. "Not from me. Not from what's coming." Before I could respond, the ground beneath us began to crack, a deep rumbling echoing through the abyss as the figure's form shifted once more. It was coming. The end was near, and we had no way out. The ground split open beneath us with an ear-shattering crack, sending a shower of debris into the black abyss below. I could feel it then, like a grip tightening around my chest, pulling me toward the endless darkness, threatening to swallow me whole. Lena's screams echoed in my ears, but they were drowned out by the sound of the earth itself breaking apart. I tried to hold on to something, anything, but the ground was unstable. It shook violently, like it was alive, and then it all gave way. We were falling again. The darkness seemed endless. The air was thick, oppressive, and I could feel the weight of it pressing in from all sides. I reached out instinctively, grabbing Lena's arm as we tumbled into the void. We hit something hard. There was no telling what it was, but it didn't matter. The pain was sharp, sudden, and then nothing. I blinked, disoriented, trying to make sense of where I was. The sound of my heart pounding in my ears was the only thing I could hear. And then, silence. Complete and utter silence. I slowly rose to my feet, my body sore from the fall. The world around me was just as dark as before, but it was different now. There was a stillness to it, a sense of oppressive calm. The usual whispers, the moans of the wind, the flickering of shadows, they were all gone. Lena lay next to me, her eyes wide with fear, her body trembling as though she, too, could feel the weight of the silence pressing against her. "Where are we?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I shook my head, unable to answer. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what was happening. Where had the figure gone? The one who had spoken to us, whose voice was so deeply ingrained in my memory that it seemed to echo in my thoughts even now. I looked around, but there was nothing. No landmarks. No sign of any life. Just endless shadows, the oppressive darkness closing in around us. Then I heard it. A low hum, distant but growing closer. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like the soft buzz of electricity. But it grew louder, and I realized that it wasn't just a sound. It was a presence. A power, an ancient, unfathomable force moving through the very air around us. Lena grabbed my arm, her grip tight with fear. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The hum was growing louder, pulsing through the air like a heartbeat. Then the darkness shifted. The shadows around us twisted and coiled, forming into shapes, figures, faces, eyes, that I couldn't quite comprehend. They were everywhere, flickering in and out of existence, their forms constantly changing, as if they couldn't decide what they were. I blinked, but the images remained. The air seemed to throb with their presence. The figures, they were watching us. A voice broke through the silence again, the same deep, menacing tone from before. "You are in my domain now," it said, the words vibrating in the air around us. "There is no escape from here, no place to run. This is where you will stay, forever." I tried to speak, but no words came. The very air seemed to stifle my breath. My chest tightened, and the coldness of the place crept into my bones, gnawing at me, pulling at my resolve. I felt small, helpless. Lena's grip tightened on my arm again, and I could see the panic in her eyes. She was shaking, but not from the cold. It was something deeper, something darker. It was as though the shadows themselves were getting inside her mind, infecting her thoughts, twisting her very being. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why can't we get out?" I didn't have an answer for her. There was no answer to give. This place wasn't a place at all. It was something beyond comprehension, beyond reason. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the ground beneath us now, rattling my bones. And then I saw it. The figure. The same one we had encountered before. It was standing in front of us, its form more defined now, more solid, as though it had materialized from the very darkness itself. It was tall, towering, and its face was hidden, cloaked in the shadow of its own existence. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dark, red like embers, and they were fixed on us. "You don't belong here," it said, its voice low, like the rumble of thunder. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move. The figure stepped closer, its form shifting in and out of reality, like it was made of pure darkness. "But now that you are here, there is no leaving. You will remain. You will serve as part of this world." I felt something cold and sharp press against my chest. A presence that seemed to slip inside me, like a dark whisper I couldn't ignore. It was as if it was calling to me, pulling me deeper into the void of its influence. Lena stepped back, pulling away from me. Her eyes were wide with terror, her face pale. She reached out for me, but the figure's presence was suffocating, pulling us apart, locking us into place. "You are nothing here," the figure said, its voice a distorted, mocking version of human speech. "Just as I am nothing to you. But together, we will be everything." I could feel the weight of its words pressing against me. It wasn't just talking about us. It was talking about the place. The dark world that had claimed us. It was alive. It was a force of nature, a twisted reflection of something deeper, something older than time itself. I had no idea what was happening anymore. No idea if this was a dream, or a nightmare, or something far worse. But one thing was certain. We were not meant to be here. And whatever this thing was, it was not going to let us leave. And so we stood there, frozen, as the darkness swallowed us whole. The air around us grew heavier, the hum now vibrating through my very soul. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. My body was paralyzed, but my mind raced. What was it? What was this thing that stood before us, speaking in riddles, claiming dominion over us? I glanced at Lena, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open as if trying to form words but unable to. The fear in her gaze mirrored my own. Her hand reached for mine, trembling. She needed me. I could feel the weight of her fear as if it were my own, but I didn't know how to help her. The figure in front of us did not move. It just stood there, its presence almost suffocating in its stillness. I could hear my own breath, shallow and quick, in the oppressive silence. The darkness, it seemed, was alive, breathing in and out with the rhythm of our fear. You think you can leave this place? The figure finally spoke, its voice thick with malice. But there is no escaping what you have awakened. Awakened. What had we awakened? The question gnawed at me, but I couldn't bring myself to ask it aloud. Instead, I focused on keeping my grip on Lena's hand, grounding myself in that small, fragile connection. The figure took a step forward, its form shifting with every movement, flickering like a mirage. The very air around it warped, bending, stretching as though reality itself was giving way. You've come seeking answers, it continued, its words like poison, curling around us. But the truth is not for the weak. The truth will bind you to this place forever. Bind us. My heart skipped a beat. I could feel the weight of its words. The way they seemed to settle into my chest, a cold, sinking feeling. Before I could react, the ground beneath us trembled again. The shadows that had once danced at the edges of my vision began to move, their forms solidifying into distinct shapes. They surrounded us now, closing in, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. And then the figure spoke again, its tone softer now, almost coaxing. You are not alone here. You will never be alone. Suddenly, the shadows pressed closer, their coldness seeping into my skin. I could feel them trying to crawl under my skin, wrap themselves around my heart, pull me deeper into the void. It was as though they were trying to possess me, to claim my very essence. Lena screamed, a sound that tore through the silence like a blade. Her voice was the last bit of light in this consuming darkness. But it wasn't enough. The shadows tightened their grip, and I could feel the air being sucked from my lungs. This is your fate now, the figure intoned, its voice smooth, as if it were savoring each word. You will serve. You will be bound to this place, bound to me, for all eternity. I struggled against the darkness, but it was no use. The weight of its power was too much. My body felt heavy, as though it were being pulled in 1,000 directions at once. I reached out to Lena, trying to hold on to her, but she was slipping away. Her hand was growing colder, her grip weakening. The shadows were claiming her too. Lina, I gasped, my voice hoarse, desperate. Don't let go, but it was too late. The shadows took her, pulling her into their embrace. She let out a final, agonizing scream before disappearing into the dark. I was alone. The figure took another step toward me, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. I could feel its gaze piercing into my soul, and for a moment I thought it would swallow me whole. But then it spoke again, its voice now laced with something that felt almost triumphant. This is your home now, it said. You belong here, just as they do. There is no escape from what you've awakened. I felt my knees buckle, and I collapsed to the ground. My body trembled violently, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin. The weight of the darkness around me felt unbearable, suffocating. The figure loomed over me, its form now solid, no longer flickering. Its eyes were the last thing I saw before everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, the world around me was no longer the same. The shadows had receded. But the feeling of oppression was still thick in the air, like a fog that clung to every inch of my being. The ground beneath me was cold and damp, and as I rose unsteadily to my feet, I realized I was no longer in the village. I was somewhere else. The landscape stretched out before me, barren and desolate, a place that seemed to exist outside of time itself. The sky was a muted gray, its clouds swirling in unnatural patterns, as if they too were aware of the darkness that now ruled this realm. The trees were twisted, their branches gnarled and blackened, their roots reaching out like claws, desperate to grasp at anything they could hold. And then, I felt it. A presence, a weight that pressed down on me from all sides, suffocating, stifling. It wasn't just the air. It was the ground beneath my feet, the very earth itself. I wasn't alone. A sound echoed through the empty expanse. A faint rustling, like whispers carried on the wind, but it wasn't the wind. It was something else. Something that wasn't supposed to be here. Lena, I called out, my voice hoarse and cracked. The word felt strange on my tongue, foreign, as though it didn't belong here. But I had to call for her. She couldn't be gone. Not like that. But the name was swallowed by the emptiness. I tried to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was as though something was holding me back. Chains invisible but painfully real. I tugged at them, thrashing against the invisible restraints, but they tightened with every movement, pulling me deeper into the cold earth. I wasn't just trapped in this place. I was bound to it, bound to the shadows, to the dark force that had claimed Lena and the others before her. A figure appeared before me, emerging from the fog like a specter. Its form was indistinct at first, shifting, blurry. But then it solidified, revealing the same face I had seen in my dreams. The figure that had spoken to me, the one who had bound us to this cursed place. "You thought you could escape," it said, its voice colder than ice. "You thought you could outwit the darkness. But the truth is, it was always within you, always a part of you." I tried to speak, to shout, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. It was as though my mouth was sealed shut, my throat constricted by some invisible force. All I could do was watch as the figure took another step forward, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. "You will never leave here," it said, its voice now filled with a twisted satisfaction. "You and your friends. You are bound to this place now. Forever." My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel the walls closing in, the air growing colder, the weight of the chains becoming unbearable. Every breath I took felt like I was choking on the very air around me. But then, a spark, a flicker of hope. I could feel it, deep within me. The force that had been gnawing at the edges of my mind, a force I couldn't name. It was still there, lingering in the back of my consciousness, waiting for the right moment to surface. The figure stepped closer, reaching out a hand toward me. "You cannot fight it," it whispered, its breath cold against my skin. "You will be consumed by it." But I wasn't going to give up. Not yet. No. I whispered back, the words slipping past my lips, hoarse but defiant. "I won't let you have me." I didn't know where the strength came from, but I could feel it surging through me, waking up the dormant part of me that had been stifled for so long. I pulled against the chains with all my might, my body straining, my muscles aching, but I kept pushing forward. I couldn't let it win. I couldn't let the darkness claim me like it had claimed so many others. And then, just as I thought I would break under the pressure, something happened. The chains shattered. The figure recoiled, its face twisting in a mixture of shock and rage. It reached for me, but it was too late. The force that had been building inside me exploded outward, a wave of energy so powerful that it sent the figure stumbling backward. I was free. For a brief moment, I could feel the weight of the chains lifting from my body, the oppressive pressure easing off my chest. But it was only temporary. I knew that. The figure would return. The darkness would return, but I would be ready. The moment the chains broke, I felt something inside me shift. Something deep, primal, like a long-forgotten memory stirring from the depths of my soul. I stood there, panting, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the world still spinning around me. But it wasn't the world that had changed. It was me. I could feel it now, the power that had been growing within me, the force that had been whispering from the shadows, urging me to act. It had always been there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And now, I was ready to face whatever came next. The figure before me staggered, clutching its chest as if something had struck it. Its form flickered, fading in and out of existence, like a glitch in reality. For a moment, I thought it might vanish entirely, but instead, it grew more solid, its eyes burning with fury. "You think you've won," it sneered, its voice low and dangerous. "You think you can escape the darkness. You've only just begun to understand the true cost of your actions." I didn't respond. Words seemed irrelevant now. I had to act, to keep moving forward before the figure had time to recover. I had no idea what I was up against, but I knew that staying in one place would only make me a target. With a sudden burst of energy, I turned and ran, the barren landscape blurring around me. The ground beneath my feet seemed to tremble, as if the very earth was alive and aware of my escape. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay here. I ran until my legs burned, until the sound of my footsteps was drowned out by the howl of the wind. The sky overhead was an endless expanse of gray, the clouds swirling in ever-tightening circles. The farther I ran, the more I could feel the pressure building. The sense that something was chasing me, something more powerful than I could comprehend. But I couldn't stop. There was something in the distance. A faint glimmer of light cutting through the oppressive darkness. It seemed like a beacon, a promise of safety, of hope. But I knew better than to trust it. Hope was a dangerous thing in a world like this. The ground began to shift beneath me, the earth cracking open as if it were a living, breathing entity. Dark tendrils like roots or veins snaked up from the cracks, writhing and twisting as though reaching for me. They moved faster than I could run, their edges sharp and jagged, like claws eager to drag me back into the darkness. I leapt over one of the tendrils, barely avoiding its grasp, but another shot up from the ground, this time wrapping around my ankle and pulling me toward the open crack in the earth. I screamed, trying to free myself, but the tendril was too strong, its grip like iron, dragging me closer to the abyss. I could feel the cold breath of the darkness on my skin, could hear the whispers growing louder, more urgent. I wasn't going to let it take me again. Not without a fight. With all the strength I could muster, I yanked my leg free, but the tendril didn't release me. It twisted tighter, its pull inexorable. Desperation surged through me as I clawed at the earth beneath me, trying to find purchase. And then I heard it. A voice, distant but familiar, calling my name. "Lina." It was a whisper on the wind, barely audible over the chaos around me. But it was enough. In an instant, I knew what I had to do. I reached deep within myself, calling on that hidden force that had awakened inside me. I didn't understand it fully, but I didn't need to. I had to trust it. Trust that it would guide me through this. The darkness recoiled as I tapped into the power within me. The tendrils shrieked, their forms writhing and dissolving in the air, as if they couldn't stand the force I was unleashing. My hand shot forward, and the ground beneath me cracked open wider, revealing the twisted, blackened roots that had been pulling me in. But I wasn't pulling back anymore. I was pushing forward. I summoned the light, the warmth, the energy that had been growing inside me, swelling like a tide. And then I heard it, the sound of chains breaking. The tendrils were gone. The darkness was retreating. I stood there, panting, my heart racing in my chest as the landscape around me began to change. The air was lighter, the sky clearer, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. But the relief was fleeting. The figure was still out there, The darkness was still out there. And Lena, I whispered her name, the weight of it settling in my chest like a stone. I hadn't forgotten her. I had to find her. I had broken free from the clutches of the darkness, or so I thought. But even as the landscape around me shifted, becoming lighter and clearer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching. Waiting. I stood there for a long moment, my breath coming in shallow gasps, my body trembling with exhaustion. The air felt different now, almost charged with an electric hum. I wasn't alone, and I knew it. A low, almost imperceptible whisper caressed the back of my mind. "You can't escape?" "Not yet." The words, barely more than a thought, sent a chill down my spine. I whipped around, searching the shadows, but there was nothing. Only the remnants of the fractured earth and the distant light that seemed to pulse with an unnatural glow. My instincts screamed at me to keep moving, to stay ahead of whatever it was that had followed me. The whisper wasn't just a voice, it was a presence, a malevolent force that I couldn't escape. No matter how fast I ran, I forced myself to take a step forward, my legs stiff and unwilling, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. Not until I found Lena. I moved through the shifting landscape. The once solid ground beneath me now cracked and jagged, like some colossal wound in the earth. The distant light beckoned me, but with each step, the air grew thicker, as if something unseen was closing in around me. And then I heard it, the faintest sound, like the rustling of leaves in a windless night. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the product of too many sleepless hours spent running from the unrelenting darkness. But then, the sound grew louder. Footsteps. Someone was out there. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't alone, not just in a physical sense, but in the deepest, most unsettling way. The presence, the force that had been pursuing me, had taken on a form. I spun around. My breath caught in my throat and saw nothing, only shadows. But the feeling of being watched intensified, closing in around me like a tightening noose. "Lina," I called out, my voice trembling, but the words were swallowed by the thick silence that had settled over the land. The footsteps grew closer, not from behind, but from all directions. It was as though the very ground was moving, shifting, closing in on me. And then I saw it. A figure, half hidden in the gloom, its form twisted and unnatural, as though it had been torn from the fabric of reality itself. It was no longer just a voice in my head. It was here. The figure stepped forward, its face obscured by a dark, shifting hood, but I could feel its eyes. Cold, hungry, relentless. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "You should never have come here," the figure said, its voice rasping like the sound of dry leaves being crushed underfoot. "This place, it takes more than you can give." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The air around me thickened, the oppressive weight of it pressing down on my chest. The figure took another step forward, and the ground beneath me trembled. "You're too late. The village is already lost." The words cut through me like a blade. The village, what was it talking about? Before I could process what it had said, a sharp, searing pain shot through my side. I gasped, stumbling backward, my hand instinctively going to the wound. But there was nothing there, no blood, no mark, yet the pain was real, burning through my skin like a fever. I staggered, my vision blurring, and that's when I saw it. A figure in the distance, barely visible through the haze, a figure that seemed to flicker and distort as if it were caught between worlds. Lena. It had to be Lena. My pulse quickened as I pushed myself forward, ignoring the pain, ignoring the figure behind me, my focus only on her. But the closer I got, the further away she seemed to become. The shadows that had once been distant now closed in around me, suffocating, relentless. The figure behind me was moving again, its footsteps louder now, closer, as though it was no longer just following me, but guiding me toward something terrible. I had to reach her. I pushed through the pain, my legs weak but determined, the world around me warping and twisting with every step. But no matter how fast I ran, no matter how hard I tried, Lena remained just out of reach. "You can't escape it." The voice whispered again, now right behind me. "You never could." The ground beneath me cracked open once more, and before I knew it, I was falling. I reached out, desperate, my hands scraping against the jagged edges, but it was no use. The darkness consumed me, pulling me down into the abyss. Falling. It was the only sensation I had left, as if the very ground beneath me had been swallowed by some gaping maw, pulling me into its depths. The darkness pressed in from all sides, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. I tried to scream, but the air was thick, heavy, and it crushed my voice before it could escape. My limbs flailed, grasping for anything to hold on to, but everything slipped through my fingers like sand. My heart raced, my thoughts scrambled, and I couldn't even tell if I was still alive or already beyond the reach of the living. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the fall stopped. I hit the ground with a jarring thud that knocked the breath from my lungs. I gasped, struggling to push myself upright, but the weight of the world seemed to press down on me, pinning me to the cold, unforgiving earth. The air here was still, unnervingly so. The silence was absolute. Not even the whisper of wind stirred the dead air. I looked around, but all I could see were shadows, shapes that moved just at the edge of my vision, never fully taking form. Was I still in the same place? I couldn't tell. There were no landmarks, no familiar terrain, just an endless stretch of blackness, like being trapped in the belly of a creature too vast to comprehend. "You are here." The voice came again, low and menacing, reverberating through the stillness. It felt as though it was inside my head, curling around my thoughts like smoke. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was the same voice. No, the same presence that had haunted me since the beginning. But this time, it wasn't just a whisper. It was here in the dark, in the heart of whatever twisted place I had fallen into. "You should not have followed," the voice continued, now closer, almost as if it were standing beside me. "This place was never meant for the living. You've crossed the line." My body stiffened at its words, dread crawling up my spine. "What do you want from me?" I managed to force the words past the knot in my throat. There was a pause. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, before the voice answered. "Nothing. Not from you. But from her." My heart skipped a beat. Her. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled, and the shadows swirled around me, thickening until they formed a shape. Human, but distorted, twisted. It was Lena. Her face was barely visible in the dim light, her eyes vacant and glassy, staring into nothingness. But there was something wrong, something deeply wrong with her. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her body seemed to flicker, her form shifting between solid and ghostly, as though she were caught between this world and something else, something far darker. "Lina," I called out, but my voice was swallowed by the abyss, just as my scream had been when I fell. I moved toward her instinctively, my hands outstretched. But before I could reach her, the shadows shifted again, pulling her away from me, dragging her into the dark void beyond my reach. "You see," the voice was mocking now, "she belongs to this place just as you do now. There's no escape, no way out." I shook my head, panic rising in my chest. "No, I won't leave her." The shadows crept closer, the whispers in my mind growing louder, more frantic. The presence surrounding me seemed to grow, its power overwhelming. Every instinct told me to run, to fight, but I couldn't move. My legs were frozen in place, my body heavy with an unseen weight. And then, I felt it. A cold touch, like fingers made of ice, brushed against my skin. I jerked back, but there was no escaping it. The touch spread like wildfire, creeping across my skin, freezing my blood in its wake. The darkness closed in, and for the first time, I realized that I wasn't just trapped in some strange, twisted version of reality. I was being consumed, devoured by something far more ancient and malevolent than I could have ever imagined. And I knew, in that moment, that there was no way out. No escape from the grip of whatever force had taken hold of me. The abyss had claimed me, just as it had claimed so many before. But just as I resigned myself to the inevitability of my fate, a voice broke through the chaos, a voice that wasn't the sinister presence, but something else. A faint cry, distant but unmistakable. Help me. It was Lena. The realization hit me like a wave. She was still here. She hadn't disappeared. But what had I done? What had I done to bring her into this nightmare with me? I couldn't just stand there. Not now. I pushed against the darkness, feeling it resist me, pulling at my every movement, but I wouldn't stop. I couldn't. I had to save her. Lina? I shouted, forcing my voice to cut through the oppressive silence.
I'm coming.
The shadows seemed to recoil at the sound of my voice, but it wasn't enough. I wasn't strong enough to fight them on my own. I needed help. I needed strength. And deep inside, I knew there was only one way to find it. The darkness around me seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive, twisting and contorting as I fought to move forward. My legs trembled with exhaustion, but my determination burned brighter than ever. I had to reach Lena, had to get her out of this place before it was too late. The faint cry for help echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone in this hell. Lena needed me, but I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to save her. The shadows pressed in from all sides, thick and oppressive. They seemed to laugh, mocking my every effort. The cold touch of the abyss stung at my skin, threatening to drag me under, but I couldn't give up now. Not when I was so close. I pushed forward, my breath ragged, my heart hammering in my chest. Then, as I stumbled, my hand brushed against something solid, something familiar. I froze. It was the journal. The same journal that had started it all. The journal I had found in the attic, the one filled with cryptic messages and warnings. The one that had drawn me into this nightmare. I grabbed it, clutching it to my chest as if it were my lifeline. It felt warm, alive in my hands, as though it had been waiting for me to return. You think you can change the course of things? The voice whispered in my mind. You cannot stop what is already set in motion. She is mine, and soon, so will you be. I ignored it, flipping through the pages. There had to be something here, some way to undo the damage I had caused. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages, my eyes scanning the words that seemed to pulse and shift before my eyes. It was all here. The rituals, the warnings, the price to pay for defying the abyss. And then, I found it. The key. A single sentence, buried deep in the pages. To save one, you must be willing to sacrifice yourself. The weight of those words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to make a choice. I could save Lena, free her from the abyss, but in doing so, I would be lost forever. My soul would be claimed by the very darkness I had sought to escape. There was no other way. Lena. I whispered her name, the pain in my chest unbearable. I'm sorry. Without another thought, I closed my eyes and spoke the words from the journal aloud, even though my voice quivered with fear. The air around me shifted. The shadows recoiled, as if in fear, and for the briefest of moments, I felt a sense of clarity. The ground beneath me rumbled, and I felt Lena's presence, faint but unmistakable, pulling me toward her. It was working, but the cost was rising. The cold that had once been a mere touch now spread throughout my body, freezing me from the inside out. The journal slipped from my fingers, falling into the abyss below, its pages fluttering in the air like the wings of a dying bird. I could feel the darkness taking hold of me, my body growing weaker, my vision fading. But in that fleeting moment, as I felt myself being drawn toward Lena, I knew one thing for certain: I had made the right choice. Lena. I whispered, the last vestiges of my strength fading. When I opened my eyes again, everything had changed. The shadows were gone. The oppressive darkness had lifted, replaced by a soft, golden light. I blinked in disbelief, my body heavy and numb, as though I had been asleep for an eternity, and there she was. Lena. She stood before me, her eyes bright and alive, a look of confusion and disbelief etched on her face. She looked as though she had just stepped out of a dream, her form glowing with a warmth that felt like a return to reality. For a moment, I simply stared at her, unable to comprehend what had happened. "Are you?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. She blinked, her expression softening. "I'm here," she said, her voice shaky but real. "But what happened? Where are we?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words caught in my throat. I glanced around, trying to make sense of the strange, serene landscape that surrounded us. The shadows had disappeared. The air was clean, free of the suffocating weight that had nearly crushed me. But something didn't feel right. The warmth that had filled the air began to fade, replaced by a creeping coldness, the same chill that had haunted me for so long. The ground beneath us trembled, and I looked down, seeing cracks forming in the earth. "We're not free," I whispered, my heart sinking. "Not yet." Lena's face shifted, her confusion turning to fear as the world around us began to collapse. The golden light flickered, dimming as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. In that moment, I understood. The abyss wasn't just a place, it was a force, and no matter how hard I fought, I couldn't escape its pull. "We're still here," I said, my voice filled with regret. "It's not over. It will never be." The ground cracked open beneath us, swallowing us whole. And then, just like that, we were gone. The darkness that enveloped us was like a shroud, suffocating, pressing in from all sides. There was no escape, no way to fight back. It felt as though we were falling through an endless void, an abyss without form or end. The cold air was thick, and the oppressive weight of it crushed me, dragging me further into the blackness. But this time, there was no terror, no fear, only the inevitable. Lena was beside me, her hand gripping mine, the warmth of her touch a stark contrast to the frozen world around us. She didn't speak. There was no need to. Her presence was enough. The pull of the darkness was all-consuming, but the bond we shared, the love that had tied us together from the very beginning, anchored us, holding us tethered to each other in the face of the unknown. We had tried so hard to escape this fate. But now, in the face of it, I finally understood. It wasn't just about escaping the abyss. It was about accepting the inevitable end. The end that had been set in motion from the very moment we stumbled into that cursed village. From the very moment the shadows had begun to chase us. It wasn't a battle we could win. It was a cycle, one that repeated itself over and over, pulling the unfortunate souls who dared to stand in its path into its eternal grip. And now, it was our turn. The cold began to lift. The darkness stretched out, and for a brief moment, there was a feeling of weightlessness, as though the very fabric of the universe had ceased to exist. Time didn't matter here. Nothing did. Lena's face appeared before me, a faint, serene smile on her lips. She didn't look afraid, she looked at peace. "Wait, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Free," she replied softly. Her words were not a declaration of escape, but rather a realization that we had come full circle. In this place, this moment, we were free from the horror, from the chase. Free from the pull of the shadows that had haunted us for so long. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. It was a release. The shadows seemed to recede, their presence becoming more distant, fading into nothingness. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt the weight of it all lift from my shoulders. I wasn't fighting anymore. I wasn't running. I was simply here, with Lena. And then everything went quiet. The stillness was profound. An overwhelming silence that echoed in the empty space. The end was here. But it was not an end of terror, not of suffering. It was a final peace. And, as the darkness closed around us one last time, I knew. This was where we were meant to be. Not lost in the world we had known, but somewhere beyond it. Free at last from the nightmares that had plagued us. For the first time since our journey began, I let go. And in that moment, I was no longer afraid.